Word up, ladies and gentlemen. We are for this, I believe I listed it as the 18th late night live we've done, but I feel like this might actually be the 19th if I go back and count. So I might have had my numbers wrong. We'll see. I'll have to double check tomorrow. What's going on, everybody? What up, Order Sweeney? What up, LM? What up, Marilyn? Odie, She, Jesse? Welcome. So you guys vote white paper today. All right. We'll see. I might change it up later. I think the black looks a little better on camera, but I feel like I haven't done a live with white paper in a long time. The only issue that I'm having right now with the white, because my lighting situation is relatively new right now. I haven't figured it out exactly the way I want it, and we have a little bit of shadow going on today, so sorry, it's a shadowy late night live today. As always, I will ask that you guys let me know how the audio volume is. We are rocking DJ Quads today. We have a full DJ Quads playlist. Audio's good. Awesome. I got my tea, which is almost the perfect temperature. I'm one of those tea wusses that has to brews his tea and then waits like 20 minutes or longer before he drinks it. Alright, so this week I made some posts. I made a couple posts to answer some questions on Instagram. Oh, you like my tee? Thanks a lot, Hoodie. This is John Stevens. This is his magical artwork. This is a t-shirt that John Neal Books made, I don't remember how many years ago, using the artwork of John Stevens. I have two of the ones that they produced of his. That is the perfect way that tea should be steeped. Nice! I know also, like with a lot of teas, you steep them for like a few minutes and then you take them out. Because I drink green tea, I never take the tea bag out of the mug. That's probably like sacrilegious for tea people, but I put it in there, I put the hot water in, I put honey in, and then I just leave it. When the water's gone, sometimes I'll just fill the mug up again. The current green tea I'm using though, I don't get two drink sessions out of it. I used to just fill up the cup again and drink it again, but no longer. Now it basically is 1 cup of green tea with honey and another cup of hot water and honey. But it's good. Alright. So what do we got here for questions? I haven't even checked all these out yet. How's everybody doing this evening? This playlist has got a lot more energy than the one we've been using for the past couple weeks. I'm having trouble staying focused, enjoying my jamming a little too much. Oh, one of these days I'll figure out how Instagram works. Wait, does it not let me see the... No, this one. There we go. Alright, we're just gonna go through them. Normally I print these out, but I figured we'll save paper since I use a lot of paper all the time. I will not print these out like I normally do, and I'll just read them off my phone. I hope you guys don't mind me looking at my phone from time to time to get them. Yeah, sorry, I'm just winning. You already noticed. Yeah, normally I print them. Today, maybe because I'm unorganized, but also I just decided since I don't use this phone for the stream at all, I could just read them straight off the phone, and it's not a problem. Broke out the oblique nib tonight. All right, Marilyn. Right on. Oh, is the mail. Wait, Marilyn, what nibs did you order from China? Which ones? What up, Ervind? Welcome. Okay, well, let's get right into it. I will start with the first question, or maybe I should wait till people are here in the chat. No, I'm just gonna answer the questions. Your PC broke. That's not helpful. Question number 1. DDB 107 Mohammed asked, how to get consistency in shades. Practice, analyze, improve, rinse, and repeat, but something seems off. So this is a question that I actually get more often than I imagine I would. But my answer is going to be basically an unsatisfactory answer, and I apologize for that. But the only real way to get consistency in your shades is practice. And if something's feeling off, what I would say, like if something feels off all the time, then I would say then there's either you can make some tweaks in your grips and flange and stuff like that. But if you do one on a page that's good and feels good, then it's really about remembering what that one felt like and trying to tap in and do that all the time. And that's where the repetition is so important. People always will bring out the quote from Albert Einstein, I believe, that said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Where when we're studying, we are doing essentially the same thing over and over, and while we're learning, we are expecting a different result because we're tweaking and we're not actually doing the exact same thing. We're playing with things and trying to get it right. Once we do one that is perfect, then we are not trying to do the same thing over and over again and get a different result. We are trying to do the same thing over and over again with the exact same result. Same as with people who are like bowlers, for example. If you go to the bowling alley, you want to throw that strike every single time. You want to train your muscles and your mind and everything, and you want to have your tools all ironed out, smooth enough that when you do it, it's going to be the exact same every single time you do it. And the only way to do that is to do it hundreds and hundreds and thousands of times over and over and over again. Baseball player, throwing a ball. You can't study how to throw a ball. It's not necessarily a lot about the grip because everybody's hands are built different. You just have to put a ball in your hands and throw it thousands and thousands of times. Every time you get a throw that's slightly better than the last one, you try to remember what you did different, what you did that time that made that one better, and then you keep going. And then eventually that, I've said this before, that fluke becomes the normal, and then something else fluky happens that makes it even better. And then you grab onto that mentally and try to repeat that over and over and over again until your work increases and increases in quality. So again, probably an unsatisfactory answer to that question because it's not something you have to fix. But when it comes to consistency, the only way to get consistent is through repetition. Now, if there's other things that are wrong with your shades, then it's less about consistency and more about the technique and what is behind your shade making. And when it comes to that, then there's a lot of other things that come into play. Like you can change grip angles, change flange angles, change your paper, change your speed, change so many things you can change. But when it comes to consistency, it's about doing one thing and doing it over and over and over again till it's always the same. If you make a change, and this is something that I experience quite a lot. Sorry, this is a really long-winded answer. This is something that I experience quite a lot in my training nowadays. I'm somewhat set in my ways in how I do things because I've been writing this script for so long, or this style. But when I tweak something, it has the potential to throw other things out of whack. And when I do that, then I have to, when I tweak one thing because I want it and I have a theory in my brain that doing that is going to eventually make everything better, I will add that change, and if it ruins other things, then I will repeat and repeat and repeat. It's like every time I do a change, I have to start back from scratch as far as the consistency, because my muscles in my mind aren't trained to consistently do that new thing. They're trained to consistently do the old thing or another thing. And that new thing may not be a good thing, but I don't know until I've put it through a lot of tests and a lot of work. What up, Doc? So there's my long-winded answer to that question. Thank you very much for asking. Mehmed will probably come in here later and I will repeat some of that, but there we go. Tina Wong says, could you film your hand writing from the side view? I would like to see your thumb angle on paper. I can do that. I can't do that during the live video, but I can definitely record a video. Maybe I'll put it in my stories or something. If I don't record that video within the next week, send me a DM, Tina Wong, or anybody else who wants to see that video, and remind me, because I'm forgetful. It is fascinating how quickly the muscles get trained. I mean, the things we learn as babies, I mean, we're not analyzing super in depth if I bend my knee at this angle, am I going to be able to walk? Nah, babies are just figuring it out, falling until they stand. So and their muscles, I mean, kids go from not being able to walk to being able to walk pretty darn quick, in my opinion, once those muscles get strong enough to hold themselves up. So we learn pretty quick. The human machine is pretty incredible. How long did it take you to master Spencerian, or at least write it confidently? That's from GW Chong 1902. That's a good question. How long did it take me to master Spencerian? I don't believe that I have mastered Spencerian. Spencerian, in my opinion, is one of the most difficult styles of calligraphy or writing that you can do, and I have achieved what I would consider to be a relatively high level, but I have not mastered it. I still get more bad strokes than I do, or more unsatisfactory strokes than I do strokes that I consider perfect. So to me, it's not mastered, but I have gotten confident and comfortable with it. And how long did that take? It's hard to say. When I started my Spencerian penmanship journey, as many of you already know, I wrote really slowly. I would write with my hand in a modern grip, and I'd essentially drawing the forms. And I wrote like that for 3 years, probably something like that, 3 years before I started transitioning to movement writing. And I had friends who were doing faster writing, and they would try to convince me, they would tell me, you got to do movement writing, like that's not real penmanship, and things like that. But my teacher at the time, Michael Saul, wrote slow, and I liked the way he was writing, and I liked the things that he was able to design. He has philosophies, and the way he talks about writing slow versus fast was very appealing to me at the time. And I think it's because of those years of slow writing that I have the confidence to write at the speed that I do now when I do crazy flourishes and stuff like that. And also the way I design things. I wouldn't be able to foil the way I do today with my burning tools and foiling tools if I didn't have those years of slow writing and slow sort of putting concepts into play. So how long did it take me to write it comfortably? I don't think terribly long, because I wrote slow and I'm an artistic person by nature. I learn things relatively quickly by nature. I was pretty comfortable with Spencerian not far from the get-go. That doesn't mean that my writing was beautiful right from the get-go. When I look back at my old writing, it's some of it when I back then felt comfortable. If I looked at it now, that writing wasn't at all at the level that I probably thought it was back then. But that had nothing to do with my comfort level. I thought I was killing it. It wasn't perfect, but I thought I was doing a really good job. And I did feel like I was doing a really good job. I just wasn't doing as good of a job as I can do today, because it's been a constant improvement since then. But honestly, if you put in work, whether you're doing slow writing or faster writing, to get comfortable with it, that's going to be different for every person. But a number of months, and you can get relatively comfortable with these forms, especially if you drill them a lot. Um, Again, like throwing a basketball, throwing a frisbee. You can get, if you don't know how to throw a frisbee, somebody can show you in a day how to throw a frisbee. And you might not get amazing at it that day, but you can throw it and feel relatively confident throwing it, or comfortable throwing it. So comfortable comes really quick. And then from there, we chip away at the perfection part. I hope that potentially answered that question. I feel like I'm in a blabby mood today, sorry. What is your job and how old are you? Oh, interesting. I'm gonna hold off on that question and check the chat here really quick because I've been talking. You don't have a thumb joint, so you've been told many times to bend your thumb. Well, I don't. The thumb bend is something that I will talk about, Marilyn, because many of the old examples of, or the old pictures of the old master's grips will be, I honestly can hardly even replicate it. Because my thumb, if I choke my pen way up into the back of, like, this is super uncomfortable. But my thumb is bent about that much. And some of those old diagrams, their thumbs are bent like that, super bent. My thumb doesn't naturally bend that hard unless I put in like immense amount of pressure like that. I can get my thumb to bend. But when I write, my thumb basically just sort of sits along my pen holder. It does bend when I can pull in and push out if I need to, from time to time. But my thumb doesn't bend like a super traditional grip that photos are, like what you've seen from Lipper and Zahner and all those guys. How long of a gap do you recommend in between two scripts? That's a personal choice. I have always been a fan of going against the grain, and I like doing more things at once. I know people, like, you're supposed to work on one thing at a time till you master it or get really good at it, and then you do another one. And I think that's really good advice. But it's also fun to just sort of do everything all at once. If you choose to do everything all at once, it's not always the best advice, because habits from one or the other will bleed into one or the other. So it is a good idea to get relatively comfortable with at least one script before you tackle another one. That doesn't mean you have to get perfect at it. If you want to, if you want the shortest road to getting really good at script writing, I would choose one script, stick with it till you're very, very comfortable with it, and then you can do another one. If you're willing to take a slightly longer road, which is what I did, I was not a race to get great at ornamental penmanship. I like the scenic route, so I do a lot of other things along the way. Most of my energy always goes to ornamental penmanship, but I do a lot of other things. So I don't think there's not a specific time that you have to wait until you start another one. I would say when you get comfortable enough that you can do another script without losing quality in the first script, then I think you're good to go. Just be aware that you're doing two different things. Otherwise, they will tend to blend together. 3-pointed pen scripts is a lot all at once, especially if you haven't gotten really comfortable with at least one of them. All right, what is your job and how old are you? That was from AK Barian Patron 20 ... I don't know. I can't see the end of your name. Sorry. What is my job? So, split job. I am a penman, I am a wood carver, and I am a professional dancer. Those are the three things I do for a living. Well, and I'm a host, I guess. I host on-stage events as well. Not this year, obviously, because COVID kiboshed that. But those are, I would say, the four things. These days, the primary things I do for a living are teaching penmanship. I do leather foiling, and I teach dance. Those are my careers. And I am 37 years old. You're not late, Brian. We're just still getting started. It's Q&A, so I'm just going through some of the questions that people put down here. I haven't even dipped my pen in ink yet, which is unusual to have been going for... We've been on here for 21 minutes already, and I haven't written a single stroke because I'm answering questions. Optimal temperature for foiling and debossing leather. Oh no, 2 people asked that question, and I meant to get a piece of paperwork that I don't have. Shoot, it's in storage under my bed, so I can't find it. I have a document that states the exact, the range in Fahrenheit that my own foil burns best at. I don't remember that number, but in sort of answering that question, and I will remember, and I will post that to my stories. I will dig it out and find it. I meant to do that this afternoon, but I got distracted. Most foiling machines, they don't stick to a single heat. Like if you have my foiling machine or any other temperature ranged heat tool, they usually have like a heat setting that isn't a Fahrenheit or Celsius number. Like if on my machine I use the digital P80 from Razortip, I foil most at 240 or 245 is the heat setting. That's not 240 degrees or anything, that's just the setting on the machine. And the reason machines don't use a specific temperature setting is because it all depends on the size of the tip that you are heating and the material that you are foiling into. If I use a broad tip, or if I'm filling a space and I use like an actual broad nib in my heating tool, I have to heat that up with a higher heat setting than I would my super fine, extra fine little ball tip that I do most of my foiling at, because those metals take a different amount of electricity to get to the optimum temperature. And I can't remember what that optimum temperature is, I apologize. But heat settings vary a lot, which is why I never have a solid answer to this question, because like sometimes on the rare occasion I've done outlines or a border on the leather pieces that I foil, and I use straight lines for those. And to get those straight lines perfect, I foil along a ruler. When I foil along a ruler, I foil along a metal ruler so that it doesn't melt. But when you foil along a metal ruler, a lot of the heat from your foiling tip gets sucked out by the ruler. So when you foil that way, or when I foil that way, I have to use a way higher setting, a setting that would normally burn right through the foil. So the temperature is sort of ever changing and something that you have to figure out. I will post though the proper temperature or the recommended heat for my particular foil. I don't know other foils on the market, but I can tell you the specific heat for my foil. Just not right now, unfortunately. I know a couple people answered that question and I didn't, or asked that question. I will answer that in my stories. All right, a couple more, then I'm going to take a writing break. What is the most important thing to remember while taking up penmanship? Ooh, I like this one. Most important thing, for me anyways, and for what I try to teach my students or friends that want to take or get into penmanship, the most important thing is, you've heard me say it before, is to fall in love with the process. Penmanship can be a repetitive, anger-inducing, annoying task to try to get a high level of skill in it, because it is super repetitive and it can feel boring or like you're going nowhere. So it is important, I feel like it's important to enjoy that process of learning going into it. Otherwise, you'll have the potential of getting burnt out on it. And I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of people get burnt out on it. They dive in and they practice and practice and study, and it's... you get burnt out. And it's not just penmanship, that's dancers, anybody that does anything. It's possible to get burnt out on things. And because penmanship requires so much drills and so much repetition, because it is muscle training and it's minute muscle training, and the growth you see is very small, it's a really high possibility of getting burnt out. So I would say to not be hard on yourself, to love the learning process, and fall in love with penmanship in general. Don't study it because you have to study it to train your eye. Study it because it's fascinating to look through the old books. Don't do the drills because you have to do them if you want to do good forms. Do the drills because, I don't know, there's not a whole lot of things that you can like about drills. I'm a weirdo and I like doing drills. I find it meditative. I find the practicing aspect of penmanship very meditative and very relaxing. So I would say keep those things in mind to keep it fun. And then what happens is, after a while of doing what you consider fun, you'll basically accidentally get good at it. Not actually accidental, because that is what you're doing, you're on that path, but you're not always like, oh, this is like, look how I'm not increasing, I'm not getting as good as I want to. There's less frustration, and you can just get good at it by doing what you like. There's nothing better than achieving a result you want by just doing what you like. That's a perfect life right there, basically. So that's the most important thing to me. And then last question on here, Aga asked, aren't you bored with all these questions about calligraphy? Absolutely not. Actually, not all that many people. I didn't have a ton of questions get asked, so a lot of those will come from the chat and whatnot today. But no, I don't get burnt out. I'm like obsessive about penmanship and calligraphy. People can ask me questions all day long, and I will answer them all day long. If you've ever hung out with me at an IAPA convention, you know that to be true, because we'll hang out until 4, 5, 6 in the morning, just talking. Sometimes answering questions if people ask them, or just talking about random stuff. I like penmanship and can talk about it forever. Oh, I have been ignoring the chat. Brian says he almost burnt out too. I mean, honestly, I've gotten close to burning out. I don't like calling it burning out, but I've never stressed a practice regimen. Never been, I gotta do 30 minutes a day, every day. I practice when I want to practice. Luckily, I pretty much always want to practice. I've gone like weeks where all I do every day is write. But I've also gone weeks and weeks, probably like a month, where I don't write at all, just because I'm doing other stuff. So it's what I want to do. It's not what I have to do. That's what I would say about that. The T and the F are driving you crazy lately. They are, I mean, getting a good stem. The better your stem, the better your T and F, basically. All right, I'm going to take a writing break here from the questions. Take a sip of tea. I can't decide if it's cold or if I'm just... I'm shivery right now, but it doesn't feel like cold shivery. It's like energy shivery, if that makes sense. Drop kick a small child. Nice. I got it. One thing that I've been answering these questions, but this has been on my mind pretty much since we started today, and this is super silly, so indulge me for a sec, ladies and gentlemen. But if you look in my camera, because of my hats in the background, if I tip my head like this and go under where that globe is, I am now wearing a tiny top hat. Sorry, because my head's been there the whole time, I keep imagining myself getting right into the right spot to be wearing that tiny little top hat. Absolutely silly. But that's been in the back of my head since we started. I don't know if previous weeks, if that hat is usually right on the very top of that globe, so it's not angled like that. But it fell off when I was printing some stuff, and now I can't stop thinking about it. Also, super silly, you're not gonna be able to see this in the camera. I have a little mark on my hand here, and I discovered in the shower yesterday that it almost looks... Take a better picture of it and post it in my stories. Another super silly thing that you have to indulge me. But I swear to you, it's shaped like a hat. Sort of. less of a bowler hat and more of like a fedora, I think. But so silly. Sorry, I'm gonna write now. These are the things that go on in my brain while I'm supposed to be focusing on stuff. Super silly. I'm going to ask a question that I'm going to pretend that somebody asks a question, but I'm just going to say it because I keep forgetting to give this tip. If somebody asked the question, Mike, if there was one habit or tip that you wish you had done in the beginning of your penmanship journey, more like earlier, what would it be? And that would be something so silly and simple. It was told to me from the beginning by Michael Saul, and I never really did it. But over the past, probably like at least 6 months to a year, I've been doing it. Not even a year, maybe 6 months. I've been actively doing it every time, and it is a game changer in your just cleanliness and whatnot. Every time you open a jar, no matter, not a new jar, but every time you open a jar to write, take a napkin or a paper towel or something. I do a really quick one of those to clean the wet ink out of the lid. And then I do a really quick, I don't usually lift it up. I leave it on the, here, I can do it down here. And I just go in a circle along the lip of the jar. So next time you close that jar, you don't have liquid ink on the top drying and then you close the jar into like dried up crystallized ink. It is, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. It's such a silly little habit, but if I could just wave a wand and magically have everybody do that, everybody would be happier with their inks and the way they're stored. Especially if you use white inks or thick inks, it makes a huge difference. All right, what sheet of paper is this? Oh, this is from back when we were working on CE Ransom. That was a while ago. It's a great habit to get into. I never used to do it. Like the inside of the lid, I never really cleaned out. I would always like wet a paper towel and clean my jar after. But after the ink already dried, like that's working backwards, Mike. But I did that for years. So I would always say, oh, I should get in the habit of cleaning the lid and cleaning the jar when I open it, and I just never did. And now that I have, it's amazing. Game changer. All right. I don't even know what I'm working on writing today. Ooh, scratchy nib. Here we go. One thing that I've been working on. So in my grip, just so you guys are more informed, you guys are super informed on every little change of my process that I make. My forearm, I'm working on rotating it even more than I used to. So I've always, or not always, but for years now, I've had a pretty traditional grip where my hand is sloping just slightly to the right. But I'm now trying to get in the habit of rotating even more to get my knuckles even flatter. Why? It's a feeling of mine. I feel like if I do that, there will be benefits. I have not yet reaped those benefits because it is not yet habitual. But I'm trying to get even more over to the left than I was before. I did that to the dinky dips too, but I'm messing up again. Dinky dips, that is one aspect of the calligraphy penmanship world, or one tool that I have never really used at home. Like I've used them on convention and stuff, or when things are supplied. I've never been a dinky dip fan, to my knowledge, or to my memory. I've never enjoyed using them. They're just not big enough. I've always liked large jars of ink. Oh, my camera going in and out of focus. I haven't locked focus here for you guys. There we go. would I recommend practice with a traditional grip from the get-go? If you are wanting to do movement writing, like if you're wanting to write like I or Brian write from the get-go, I would, yes, recommend a traditional grip. If you are wanting to write slowly, I would recommend a more modern grip because it gives you a little more control slowly. Keep this practice sheet? Why? I mean, I keep all my practice sheets. They're all in a box somewhere. What up, Mohamed? I answered your question. It was the very first question I answered. So, sorry that you have to wait till the video's done or go back to the beginning to hear the answer. It was a rather long-winded answer. Costly dinks go in the dinky dips. That makes sense. Let me have that this one? Oh, this one. Sure. I feel like, because I did it better, I have a copy, or I have one of these, I think, cut out that's in my scrapbook folder. There's writing on the back side of this paper too, though, as you can see the ghosting shining through. But if you want it, wait, let me make a note. For Brian. There, now I won't forget. But the R is not very good. I could probably do a better one for you. Whoa. Oh, that's a good one. Booyah, I like that shape. I don't mind the backside. Cool. I mean, I have to make the note just so I don't write over it, because I end up writing over every sheet of paper so many times. All the old practice sheets. Oh, this ink kind of bleeds into this paper. This might not be a good ink to use today, but whatever. I guess for this week's signature, I have to get used to that stroke a little more. It's funny, such a simple little change to a... Thank you for the reminder, Fozzie. Such a tiny little change to this stroke. Like when I do going through, feels like continuing on feels super comfortable. But when I have to go and cut it, which I'm also used to because I've done the F in Friends of Penmanship in the Moderaz letter so many times, but for some reason, I just don't do the form as good as when I do the continuing oval way. I'm certain it's an up here thing and not an in my muscles thing. So I gotta get in the habit, or I gotta unlock the ability to do a better version like so that cuts off. When I do this one, for some reason my shades end up starting higher, so they don't end down here, they sort of end there. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I can only explain it as I think it's a me thing that my brain is just doing instead of doing it the way I should be. But I'm gonna need this stroke for this week's Sig Slingin' Sunday signature. So I might as well practice. I'll do a few of these and then dive into some more questions. Feel free to, you guys can always ask questions. I'll just take a break on the Instagram questions. I don't have very many more, I don't think. There wasn't very many asked. I think last time I did this, there was a lot, and now there wasn't as many this time, so. An office day. Here we go. I mean, if Art Supply Warehouse has nibs that are good, they might have some good like Gillot 303s or something. I mean, you could even get some Nico G's or something. Most art supply shops have Nico nibs or Tachikawa nibs that you can even work slow or just have something to work with no big shades. If you're trying to go quick, then yeah, I guess the Zebra G's. So what I would do then, I would just practice hairline until you can get something that shades well. Or do you have are there any penmen or calligraphers that are local to you that might have some that will loan you or spot you a nib? There's got to be some people local, or at least relatively local, localer than China. This capital stem is not my friend. This capital stem is sometimes my friend, but sometimes not my friend. Orange County, oh, then there's other people. There's other calligraphers around there. Are you a member of like the Los Angeles Guild or any of the guilds in California? There's bound to be somebody that could help you out. 303. The last bad batch that I saw was just misaligned. So they were scratchy. Right out of without a magnifying glass, you could see that the tines were just misaligned. They could be bent to be aligned, but there was just misalignment. And then when the alignment is slightly misaligned, then yeah, they get scratchy. But for the most part, it's similar to if there's a poor batch of Hunt 101s. They could be bent back into shape. The only issue with the 303 with bending back into shape is 303 is very fine, so they're already, even like a perfect 303 is still pretty scratchy. So they can be pretty tough to refine or to fix. I haven't used a 303 in a while. They don't fit in my workhorse pen. And the pen I used when I was using 303s no longer fits my hand as good as this one. I need to fix the flange on it so that it is better suited to my today grip. Zebra Gs are good if you want to work slow. They're what I mostly use when I work slow and when you need a lot of control. I was actually using for a while, I was using a Nico G for my business penmanship practice because I didn't need to worry about adding shades where I didn't want to. And they do get a really, really nice hairline. Sometimes, most of the time. So I was using them for a little bit. But definitely a workhorse. There we go. Okay, this signature is going to take some work. It's got the A shade, which I find challenging. It's got the C, which I also find challenging. And then it's got the compound curve, or the nice loop to go into the compound curve of the S, which is another stroke that I can do it great when I'm not going into a shade. But when I do the S, I get a weird, not always that shape, but I get a weird kink in like this area, unfortunately. Something about doing a figure eight when I'm going over to the left on my way down, that compound curve is not nearly as beautiful and graceful as it should be. Something I have to iron out. Dedicate practice to. I'm digging the music today. If you guys don't know who DJ Quads is, he's wicked. I don't think he produces as much music as he used to. But his royalty-free stuff is just so cool, in my opinion. I mean, for a Nico G, if you haven't been using it with like Iron Gall ink, I'm pretty sure those things will go forever. I'm sure you could drive over one with a car and they'd still probably be fine somehow. I used one with only Iron Gall ink for a year, and it was scratchy, but it was still technically usable. They're pretty impressive. That's what we want. That, I mean, the shade could be a bit bigger, but that is sort of the ideal for today's signature. Now we got into the second stroke, which is the C. Gotta come up quickly, down quickly, round bottom here to go over, and it comes down all the way to the baseline. That's the weird part. With the C, well, you guys, if you saw the breakdown on IGTV, you know what I find is the weird part, or how that C has like a tiny little rounded bottom and then goes to a long horizontal oval on the left side. Like so. Shade has to be up here though instead of down low, but yeah, super small and round here, and then goes way long on this side, which is interesting. Oh, Hunt 101 would for sure rust quickly. I think I'm using a Hunt 101 today. Yeah, I was using Leonard Principles for the past couple weeks, but just a little while ago I switched back to an old Hunt 101, and it wrote quite nice. I'm trying as hard as I can to not start any new nibs lately, for no good reason. I just want to see the kind of longevity I can get out of these other nibs. I feel like this might have been one that I sharpened back when I was doing videos and stuff on sharpening nibs. But it writes fairly nice. Because they always tell you not to cross too thick, and it's so close to the A. Yup, no crossing thick lines, that's against the rules. And you blow dry them, wow. Or you blow them dry with your mouth, you probably mean. Copperplate is so much better with a straight holder. I 100% disagree with that statement, but that's a personal opinion. Many people like writing it with a straight holder. I am not one of them. I feel like that is the opposite of what I would want to use a straight holder for copperplate or round hand. Whoa! That came out pretty darn decent. Yeah, if I'm doing a script that is angled, that is on a slant line, oblique holder. Or that's a shaded script on a slant line. Wears out your hand in a modern grip. It shouldn't. It should fit in your hand. I mean, the point of the pen is in the exact same place as it would be with a straight pen. There should be no real difference in feeling. That was pretty darn... I mean, the things that would need to change. This exit stroke on the A has to be taller. so that this stroke can come in a little bit farther and cross in there. But for sort of an accidental go for it, it's pretty close. And my S needs to be taller as well, but that's all right. Nope. Round. Why am I not rounding out that horizontal lobe? I love that Fozzie's in here, but she's running errands. I know a lot of European people really like to use straight holders for copperplate and English roundhand and grosser script. I'm not one of those people. I feel like if my shades are going at an angle, it doesn't make any sense for me to use a straight pen. Can I do it with a straight pen? Yeah, but why? Spencerian was originally done with a straight pen too, but that's why they invented the oblique holder, was to make it easier. So personally, I'm pro oblique, but I totally get people like straight pen, and use whatever you like. If you like doing ornamental penmanship with a straight pen, do that. It's just not for me. I personally believe the oblique is the better tool for the job. Because technically the pen should feel the exact same. Like if I'm writing with this pen, or if I write with, here's a straight holder, or if I write with this pen, my hand is the exact same. Pressure, grip, weight, everything is the exact same as far as in the hand. The only difference is the angle of the tines. So when I press down, my tines can open more naturally.
It sounds good right now after what we just experienced, doesn't it? Grilling out, lawns being mowed, and pools opening. These are some of the things we expect with summer.
That's how it should be. Should be no tension. We should be able to write all day long. These signatures look like a roller coaster. They kind of do. I'm gonna go back to some questions. See what else we got in here. Oja Swinny asks to demystify the fancy cheat/OP terminology, or I'll just question the questions during the live. The OP cheats. So I said on Discord that I wasn't gonna talk about these a whole lot because they're well, I explained them a little bit in the live. But the main cheat, and what is referred to as these cheats for anybody who wasn't in the Discord, these are referring to Del Tisdale's notes. It's his ornamental penmanship 1 through 6. These are articles on the Iampith website. Del Tisdale sharing stories and breaking down Mataraz's writing and sharing stories that he heard from Brownfield back in the day. And the word cheat is they weren't called cheats. At one point, when Brownfield was explaining to Del how Mataraz did something, Del's initial thought was, well, that's cheating. And that's why he called them cheats. Similar to last week when I was doing that signature with the really big E and I was filling in the little loop at the end. That's technically cheating. Wasn't cheating because the penmen of the day used all kinds of different techniques to make things look perfect. And it's the end goal is what's important, not how you get there. Different penmen had different techniques in getting there. Some people didn't do big shades at all. They did small shades and filled them all in. That would be technically called a cheat. But many of the things that Mataraz did sort of go against how it looks like he wrote. Like I believe he wrote relatively slower than we imagined. But he wrote in a way, not his capitals would have had to have been smooth and fast. But his lowercase letters, he was able to write them slow. I think it's connective strokes and things were quick, but he had control using combination finger movements and stuff like that maintained a look of fast writing. Another one of the techniques that's talked to in that one is the was touched on, the pinky pivot, which I don't like that term, but we'll call it a pinky rest. And that was, the way I'll explain that is essentially when we do forearm movement, so all the movement that most of the movement that I've been using today, where our forearm is on the table and it is stretching to give us our sort of writing zone and to give us more control. The movement is still propelled by the arm. Same sort of idea, but you take what's going on in the forearm and you drop it down to the pinky. So your pinky's resting on the page, and it is, instead of gliding as this is all solid and not moving, gliding, it is stretching. I can't demonstrate that super well. I'll be honest, it's not a technique that I consciously think about very much. I'm sure it's an element that comes in time and time again in my writing, but it's not something that I actively work on. May I actively try to work on it in the future? Possibly. Is it something that I would recommend somebody just getting started do? No, because it adds an extra step of thinking, and I think it's important to learn to create everything in multiple different ways in your practice, and then you can pick and choose which techniques you like best. But it is, I find anyways, rather complicated, and to be quite honest, it feels very unnatural compared to how I normally write. I write very glidey, so my fingers glide most of the time. And that's why I say every once in a while, it might stop and flex a little bit on like lowercase small letters, but not consciously. So that's my answer to those ones. Double shade techniques, double pivot techniques. There's lots of techniques. And I don't feel comfortable with them enough myself to really talk about them too much in a live or demonstrate them, because they're not really things that I employ in my own writing. Perhaps in the future, it's something that we can delve a little deeper into, but as of right now, that's gonna be my take. All right, what else we got? Do we have any more questions here? Your background and backstory to penmanship. Brian asked for my backstory in penmanship. My backstory in penmanship, for those of you who've never heard it, I got into calligraphy and penmanship. Whoa, that was loud. That was my heater. I don't know if you guys even heard that. I got into penmanship back in 2010, 2011-ish is when I started getting into it. I discovered penmanship through my love of fountain pens. I loved fountain pens. I liked all of the little mechanics, and I like things that are contraptions. I like when things like unfold and aren't just a simple tube of ink with a ballpoint on the end. And it's not just pens, just in general. I like things that can be considered contraptions. So I was super drawn to old fountain pens. So I started collecting old fountain pens, and I amassed quite a collection. I spent a lot of time on the Fountain Pen Network. I would go to like the Los Angeles International Pen Show because that was my local show. And in getting into pens and like restoring and repairing old vintage pens from like the 20s and whatnot, that made me want to improve my handwriting. And I did what everybody does when they want to improve their handwriting. We go on Google and type, how to improve your handwriting. And that's when I stumbled on the Iampith website. And I didn't know Iampith was, I don't know what it meant. I never really read the top of the website. I just knew that it was a website that had PDFs of old penmanship books. And I found those books. The book that I was primarily interested in back then was Palmer Method, because I liked flexi writing, but I wanted to just have nice, clean penmanship. So I spent a lot of time on that website or with those books, practicing. And then I very shortly after that discovered Spencerian through the IAMPITH website and like shaded writing. Initially, I was I'd known about copperplate and whatnot and other calligraphy styles like Old English and stuff. I went through a small calligraphy phase when I was probably 13 or 14 years old when I was younger. Again, I'm always been relatively artistic, so yeah, I went through a phase of that back in the day. But I wanted to just improve correspondence writing. I got obsessed with writing letters. I had friends that were on cruise ships, so I'd write letters to them. My penmanship wasn't amazing, but I just enjoyed writing letters. I wrote in a journal every day. I don't do that anymore, but I wish I did. And then when I discovered Spencerian, after discovering Spencerian, about a year after that is when I attended my first LA Pen Show, and I met Michael Saul there and saw him write. And I had known his work from the IAMPITH website before, and I had seen the shaded Spencerian writing, and that's sort of what I call my rabbit hole. That was the beginning. I slipped in when I started diving into Spencerian script. I've been falling ever since then down that rabbit hole. It kind of sucked up my entire life. No, originally I would use practicing Spencerian and just regular penmanship in general as a meditative thing after a long day. I'm an artist. I don't really have long days, or I didn't really have long days. But I just found it relaxing at night to play some chill music and practice. I would just do drills, do ovals, write a letter. It was never super focused practice. It was just sort of doing it to do it. I never compared my writing to other writing, really. I just wrote, and however it was, it was. And then progressively got better and better. Learned about, after using the website for years, I was told that IAMPITH was an association and that you can join it and that there's a convention. I had no idea. So I ended up attending my first convention. And by this time, Instagram was in full swing and everything, so I was into Spencerian. I was a Spencerian writer at that point. And that's basically the history. I don't use fountain pens nearly as much as I used to. I have simple monoline ones that I use for business writing or just for regular correspondence. But the ones that are in my collection, all my old gold nib flex writers and whatnot, I don't use all that much. I would like to use some of them, but they don't produce the quality of work that I want, the fineness of line and the size of shades and stuff like that, because of the oblique holder and the nibs that I use. So because they don't look as good, I don't use them. So I should probably sell most of them one of these days. They're around here in various boxes and display cases and whatnot. But I'll probably get rid of those eventually just because I don't use them and somebody else could use them to start a pretty cool collection. But that's my history of penmanship and calligraphy. Totally sort of by accident. I never ever considered calligraphy to be a business, or never considered it even being a business in the future. It was 100% just something I did for fun, for correspondence. I never really thought about teaching until a friend of mine asked if I would teach a class for them, and I said, sure. And before I said sure, I reached out to Michael Saul, who was my teacher and mentor at the time, and asked him if he thought I could teach a class, and he said, yeah, do it. So those weren't his exact words, but he told me yes, so I said yes. And then from then on, I've been teaching penmanship, and it sort of has taken over my life, as I say. Which is fine with me because I love doing it and it's fun. And I love teaching. So that's what I do. That's my story, the sort of abbreviated quick version. Oh, Waterman was my primary collection. I have some Waterman 12s. Waterman 52 was my jam. That was my favorite pen. I actually had my favorite one was a Waterman 52 and a half. There's a 52V, which is short, and then there's a 52.5, which stays long, but it's skinny, which I like because the standard 52s were a little bit wide for the grip that I liked. So I liked the 52.5, the skinny version of the Waterman 52. The red ripples were very nice. I never acquired a Waterman number 7 red ripple pink nib, but maybe one day. Who knows? Just for fun. Just to have. But I have some very, very flexible, nice Waterman nibs. The Waterman safeties are really awesome. Yeah, lots of cool. I like fountain pens. I still go to fountain pen shows every year. I don't know if it'll run next year. I hope it does. Every year I go to the Philadelphia Pen Show. Hopefully, just because a good friend of mine, Eric Orozco, runs it. So hopefully I'll get to attend that again. Because I like pen shows. I like geeking out on pens. I just don't use them as much as I should or would. So I'll keep collecting them. I actually have... Where are they? Oh, here they are. I don't know if I've showed these on here before. I think I may have. My newest pens. And I actually use... Yeah, I was using this one for business writing practice just the other day. This gorgeous pen. It's beautiful. With a giant gold nib on it. With a super, super, super extra fine nib. I use this one for business writing practice sometimes. It is a Franklin Christoph. I can't remember the number. I specifically like this pen. Like I said, I can't remember the number and it doesn't say it on it, but I like this one because the nib, it's a giant nib, but the nib sits down into the pen. You can see it's about almost like 1/8 of an inch into the pen, so the tip of the pen isn't quite as far away from my fingers as it normally would be. All their other pens, the nib basically sits right on the end, so the nib is an extra 1/8 of an inch longer. Not a huge difference, but it makes a difference to me, so that's why I like this model. Maybe I'll post a video of it writing. And another one, this is same pen, same model. I switched, the nib goes between the two of them. But this one has right now it's got a broad pen on it for what I use, what I call ghetto ancho, or my super casual broad stroke calligraphy, those types of writing that I use for correspondence, just for fun. So those are my two newest fountain pens. They're not super new. I got these last February when I was in Philly. As well as, wait, I have one more here. Here it is. This is my Shown Design Pocket 6. This one's fun. Tiny little pocket pen. It's all machined aluminum. I think aluminum. And then the pen comes out there, and this screws on there. There we go. So that's the Shown Design Pocket 6. Right now it has a really interesting nib on it. It doesn't have any ink in it, but the nib writes fine normally, but then when I flip it upside down, it's able to write sort of like a broad pen a little bit, so I can get some shaded like Untitled-esque type writing when it's upside down, just for fun. Just a silly little thing. I think I'm gonna eventually get another custom nib in just extra fine for it one day, and then this will be a pen that will just sort of get like chucked in my bag. Eventually this coating will get beat up, but I don't mind, because then it'll just have character. It actually has a stamped number on it. That's one of the reasons I bought it. Where is the number? This is number 87. So when he made these, the very first batch, I believe, I could be telling this story wrong, but only the very first batch, I think, of these pens had stamped numbers. He hand stamped them, but then it was so much work that he doesn't do it anymore to his pens, and they had all sold out, apparently, or he thought, but he found two when he was going to the Philadelphia Pen Show last year. He had two more, so me and my friend Eric got the last two just because it was special because it had the number on it. So I wanted it. So I got it. I don't use them nearly as much as I would like to use them. I need to get back into just regular correspondence. If I write with an oblique holder and a superfine nib, so I don't end up using my fountain pens nearly as much as I wish I did. But as you can see, I still like to geek out about them. They're cool little tools, cool little contraptions. But anyways, that's my story of penmanship. Aravind, who's in here, I believe, or at least he was, says, why do we use oblique holder fundamentally? What's the reason for its invention? That's a good question. So the oblique holder was originally invented here. Let me put a nib in a straight holder. Ooh. Camera's focus. Yeah. Put just a random nib in a straight holder. So the reason we use the oblique holder is because we use a heavily shaded style of writing that's at an angle. Yeah, I've only written, this is as much as I've written today is what you guys see. Today's a talkie live. Hope that's okay. Hey, why not? So, because Spencerian is written at an angle, we can just use these strokes as an example. The shades happen at traditionally 52-degree slant line, or, I mean, in grosser script, 55, my writing 48, Madara's 45, but at a slant. And when we're using a straight pen, the tines open up like so. They open at the direction that you're pulling the pen. So in order to have the tines open up to make this shade, I could do it if I was going really quick, but my tines are going to be fighting the paper because the angle they want to open is this way. They don't want to open. If I press down and go this way, they're just going to dig into the page. So yeah, with a straight pen, that leaves us with, we can either sort of cock our wrist this way and write, or we can turn the paper and write this way, which I'm assuming is how normally they would do it. You would write like so with the paper, so you're writing very much away from yourself, which I think works great, and I think it's definitely possible. Like this is how I would write with a straight pen if I was asked to do Spencerian. But now where that comes into, where I think that was not an issue, because it's definitely possible, but I think doing all the flourishes, most of them are based on horizontal ovals, and I think it's a lot easier to do a horizontal oval at less of an angle away from yourself. So if I were doing horizontal ovals, right now I'm going very much away from myself and towards myself. So my arm has to move a lot this way, which is, it's hard to maintain the same level when I'm using so much push and pull motion. Whereas if I'm at slightly less of an angle, it's easier for me to get more lateral movement than it is to get push and pull movement. Oh, thanks for popping by, Mehmed. Have fun at the office. So I think that's why they invented the oblique holder, so that they could have the paper at slightly less of an angle and have an easier time doing the horizontal ovals. I know I can write with a straight pen with my paper turned at a super strong angle, but because I'm trained to do horizontal ovals now, it will be really weird for me. I could retrain myself to do my ovals at this angle, and anybody who originally trained to do them at this angle, similar to any left-handed person who learns to write, they train themselves to do ovals at whatever angle works for their hand and their pen. So I just think majority, for probably ease of teaching and ease of flow with how our anatomy is built for a right-hander, it made more sense to add the oblique flange and be able to write the ovals more horizontal than away from yourself. Someone told you that it was invented for a person with carpal tunnel. or with arthritis to prevent carpal tunnel. Possible. If that's true, I don't know that story, but it's quite possible that that's where some ideas of it originally came from. I really think the idea primarily came from trying to get the angle easier. Because I think if you took out shades, like business writing and whatnot would be written at what is a natural sitting elbow moving this way. Is how children and like not ornamental writing, but how standard writing would be taught. So then all kids are writing to move their arm across the page this way and to make all their ovals and forms this way. But then to do ornamental, they would have to turn their paper like this to get the shades, which totally changes the way they naturally make their ovals. So they created a device, the oblique holder, so they keep their paper the exact same as they would keep it for any other style of unshaded writing, and they can do the shaded writing. So it's less muscle training required, less variables in play when you use the oblique holder. Carpal tunnel is wrist pain. I mean, carpal tunnel, there's a lot of aspects of life that can create carpal tunnel. Computers and using mice and keyboards are probably worse for us than our writing, I would imagine. Any plans for becoming a master penman? Well, the IAMPT has their certificate program, and I have 2 of the certificates required on that road. I've been asked this question before, and for me it's less about being a master penman and more about acquiring the skills that make a master penman. I mean, would I like to have the title master penman? Yes, of course. I think that would be awesome. But the title itself isn't a huge goal of mine. The skill and the knowledge probably even more so than the skill, is super appealing to me. So will I one day become a master penman? Potentially, if I make it there. I would not be against it. It would be fun. "20 minutes? I mean, that's not that long. You gotta use that thing all day, every day. You gotta make sure you like it. That makes sense." Now, another question in here. Brian, earlier today requested, I gotta get super warm if I'm gonna do this, requested the capital M or W whole page ornamental capital. So Brian wants me to Brian, you're still in here. Do you want whole page horizontal? Like the M has to take up this whole thing? Jeez. Yeah, not landscape. That's too long. We'll go, you want whole page horizontally in thick and landscape. Oh, jeez. That's huge. The issue with doing it that way, like I can do the flourishes big enough and the shape big enough. We'll imagine here. Let me get another sheet of paper. Like I can do a super large capital M. This has lines on it, but it'll work for now. And make it span the entire page. But the shade, to make that look decent, would have to be like half an inch thick. And no nib can do that. And we go thick with On Wards Live. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna do one portrait full width and see how that goes first. And actually, what I think I'm gonna do, here, let me try with this nib, but I don't know that this nib will create a big enough shade. Gosh, how big is that? Go pencil and see what we got here size-wise. This is so silly. These are Calligraphy challenges. Maybe I should do that every week. I should have one Calligraphy challenge. people can submit and I'll choose one of them. I'll do a calligraphy trick. Oh, that's not that big, I guess, this way. I mean, that's big, but... So the shade for that one would have to be... I don't even know if I can make a shade that big with any nibs that I have. I'd have to draw it in after. And I would just do a shade there as well, probably. But that's not actually that big. Minus the shade. I mean, the flourish seems okay. Let's see what we're gonna do. We're gonna dip. I'm gonna break the nib rule here a little bit. Get a whooper plate. Yeah. I would like to have one. Yeah, I can draw the shade in afterwards. So what I end up doing, you'll see I break the rule where the tip has to line up with the point, because I need more ink in my pen than will fit. So I need to dip a little bit deeper, so I pull my nib out a little bit farther. Oh, but this nib isn't very sturdy in there. I'm probably gonna end up switching nibs. And then I'm gonna dip quick so that I get a bigger puddle or pool of ink. All right, let's do it. Okay, hold up. Started shading way too soon. Raise my chair just a little bit. Ugh. Feels weird maxing out a nib. Feels like the nib doesn't want to do it. Gosh. The biggest challenge, I'll explain this to everybody, what's hard about things like this, and why I got that nib snap and this airline right here. What happens when you're writing this big, as we've talked about before, it's important for the forearm to stay nice and flat and move along the paper. Where when I write this big, what ends up happening, I probably have to write a little bit farther away from myself. Because what ends up happening is I'm coming over here to get this part. My arm is coming down here, is making this sort of a movement. It's angling down so that it's reaching this point, and then as it goes up, it's then at too sharp of an angle and digging into the page. My arm is not staying fully horizontal the entire time. But also have to be very careful. I might have to even take my pinkies off, because you'll also notice, I don't know if the camera shows it, we have these little bleed marks or smudges, because as I'm coming up here to do the shade, my fingers inevitably drag through what I already wrote. So the only way around that is to write completely 100% floating, which is really hard to do. We use our pinky as our base to keep everything, or to keep our nib the same height all the time, so we get nice and even. But to take that off, sometimes what I will do, I did this for the giant, what word did we do? Did I do gorgeous or grand? Can't remember. But I had to make it really big, and I would skate on my wrist right here. Choke up on the handle. But choking up, I mean, nothing I do with my nib will change anything. Or maybe you're not talking to me. Nico G can make a 1/4 inch shade. I have tried and checked its maximum shade. Yeah, Nico could, ow, that's a lot. You'd have to go, I mean, I wouldn't be able to go fast and do a 1/4 inch shade with a Nico G. Not possible. But even if I go back, my fingers still need to rest. Like this is 4 inches that I have to travel. it's impossible for me to reach up there without my fingers hitting, going through that hairline. It just, in the traffic of the word or of the letter, it's not possible. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna skate on the heel of my palm. I'm gonna lift my pinky and everything off the page, and the heel of my palm is gonna be, and it's just at this size, I'm just sort of maxing out. I'm getting close to hitting that hairline, but I'm not quite hitting it. The control might go 1000% out the window trying to do it that way. And then Brian wants full landscape, which may not be possible. We'll see. Okay. Still getting airline right here because I'm nervous of nib snaps. But that shade, that's basically maxed out, unfortunately. No, I mean, it can go wider. This one's a little wider, but it's already running out of ink almost halfway. Let me try on the other side of this sheet of paper. I should probably let the paper, yeah, I gotta let it. My nib's gonna dig in there. I'm gonna use some, used paper as a warm-up, but maybe not. My used paper that I have on my desk today is very used. I have folders of once used, twice used, or no more space paper. Is it okay to hold the pen at a higher position a little away from the flange? How it affects our writing when holding closer to the paper and away from it? So, interesting. I was just reading not an article, a series of notes by Brownfield, where he was talking about how a lot of penmen choke up, or what he says, the way he worded it, crowd the nib. And that means, and this is something I think you see a lot, but he was one of Mataraz's last students. And he would say that people would always crowd the nib. So they get way to the tip of the pen, and their thumb is right on the flange, and they get crowded up here, which is how a lot of people write, and there's nothing wrong with it. But he suggested, and this is the first time I've ever seen this suggestion in writing, but he suggested giving the pen more space, backing up off of the pen a little bit more, so earlier today I was trying to write with the pen, like this is a little bit farther back than I naturally would be. I don't usually crowd the pen, my thumb doesn't touch the flange, and I don't touch the very tip of the holder. I'm usually about at least an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch off the end. But that's just a personal preference thing, I would say. If you're here versus if you're back here, it doesn't really change the amount of control you have. It does change how you will manipulate the pen. Your shades and whatnot are going to act different. It also changes your potential depending on your flange angle. I know every answer I give always boils down to, well, it depends on your flange angle. And that's really true, because if I'm back here, it's going to, like if I'm up here, my nib is going to be likely more vertical than if I back off, just because of where it's sitting on my hand, it's going to be more shallow. So if I were going to be writing, it looks weird way back there. If I was going to be writing like this, but farther back, my nib would be more shallow, and I like writing with a relatively steep pen angle or flange angle, so I would bend my flange to force my nib to stay at a steeper angle when I'm held that way. So it all kind of depends on how you hold it, how the flange is adjusted. So it does make a difference, but I don't know, I can't confirm that one is sort of better or worse than the other just because I haven't experimented with it enough. I think it was just yesterday or the day before yesterday that I read that for the first time in those notes. And I haven't read it super thorough to get his full take on it. It was just something I skimmed through and found it to be an interesting little tidbit and something to experiment with. But his big thing was don't crowd the nib. That eBay picture that's holding the pen like this or something. So terrible. They sell a bunch of different pens. I think those pictures are on Etsy somewhere as well, I believe. Now, one thing I want to try here. Also has to do with the flow of the ink and how well it travels off the nib. Yeah. It does indeed. Too big. I don't know what you mean by too big, Marilyn. Whoa. My pen is too short for that one, you're right. Oh yeah, I mean that's a big part of it. If you do really, really big swells, some inks or some nibs, that's why I'm changing my nib. I'm gonna see, and this one you can see right now, very much breaking the half rule. My nib point is all the way at the edge of my pen here. But I'm gonna try to use a beak nib and see if I can get it to hold more ink. Because my 101 is not gonna hold enough ink to get that full shade. Now this is an old nib, so I don't know if it's still writing worthy. I feel like this might have been the one that I did the giant shade on Instagram a while ago. And I may have worn it out that day doing that shade, so it might not be any good for writing anymore. I don't know. It may or may not give me what I'm looking for. You want to see my vintage nib collection? I don't have a ton of amazing vintage nibs. I have a lot of vintage nibs that I don't use because a lot of the vintage nibs that today people are spending a lot of money on, I'm not including the Dream Points, but a lot of the sort of just standard ones like the Esterbrook 128, the Esterbrook like 358, I believe. But a lot of like the less sought after ones are now going for what the sought after ones used to go for, and to me they're less good than modern nibs. I have a lot of those because I acquired them back in the day. Well, here, can I get this drawer? I'll just show you some of them. This is a drawer full of nib boxes, but it looks like a lot of nibs, and it is a lot of nibs, but a lot of them aren't amazing. Like this is a box of Esterbrook 126s, which they were called double spring, but they're not very flexible. A lot of these nibs, like the Hunt 22, they're not a lot of amazing nibs. I don't buy nibs very often anymore, but I used to buy a lot of nibs. I don't use them because, to me, they're not good nibs. I would rather use a Leonard Principal, a Hunt 101, or a Jalop 303. So I don't use most of my vintage nibs. They're just now part of the collection, and the boxes look cool, is really the only reason I have them now. Okay. How is this nib gonna write for me today? Whoa! Stay on there, ink. See, so we max out on width. In order to get this shade looking nice, I would want it to come down to about there. Yeah, don't fall in love with vintage nibs. It's too expensive of a hobby. I mean, I like nibs. I genuinely don't buy nibs anymore, and I haven't for pretty much years because they are way too expensive. and they're not worth it. 100%, in my opinion, not worth it. All right. Let's see here. I am impressed, though, that I got that much ink. I mean, obviously, I got gray. It's kind of nice. It's kind of neat having the shade from dark black to gray on the end here. But that is a lot of ink. Oh, I didn't even finish the M. Whoops. All right. Let me try a couple more on here, and then we're going to try to go full landscape for Brian. There's just not enough ink to fit on the nib, or the nib can't hold enough ink for what I'm trying to do. Oh, that's a big shade. Yeah, totally out of ink. I should have dipped again. That's a big letter M though. Ew, I don't like, if a pen spring wouldn't help me in this one. It would bottom out. I don't think a pen spring would help doing, in this instance, going this fast and shading this big. Because to get a shade that big, I have to press way too hard. I'm pretty sure a spring would just bottom out. In theory. That's why I've never used them, because to me they bottom out too easily. So I don't use them. Okay, now we're going to try to go landscape here. I'm going to get some unlined sheets of paper. Oh, the unlined sheets of paper in the file cabinet. Yup. Try to do some landscape one and see what we can accomplish. I have glasses. I don't need protective goggles. These tines, they seem to be doing all right though. That is super thick though. I wonder if I can... I'm debating if I... Normally this is not how I would write this, but if I tip my flange this way, which is interesting thought because it's opposite of how we think of normally rotating. Normally when we do, like in slow writing, and some people do it in fast writing too, they'll rotate this way, so the nib goes along that flex. But I'm wondering if I can rotate the other direction to force my right tine out even farther. I don't know if that will work, but I kind of want to try it. The bleed-proof white would maybe be better because it's thicker. But we'll see what we can get here. All right, unlined paper. Zoom out a little bit. This down there to get focus. Okay. Try a W this time. Oh, waiting a couple seconds. Are we back? I think I lost you guys for a sec. But I think we're back now. That was weird. Gosh. Oh, darn it. That is a gorgeous shade. I lost a lot of ink in that nib snap. It is incredibly difficult to keep the nib flat for that entire thing. And obviously I'm still getting airlines on the right hand side, which I can't seem to fix. Oh, that's tough. Let's try again. But that is a very big W. Huge. I can probably stand to make that shade a little bit shorter too. Currently I'm using a Mitchell 138, I believe, beak nib. And I have nibs that I'm pretty sure can go wider than this one, but they're shorter, so they don't hold as much ink. The reason I'm using this nib is because it's longer. I can get it to hold, and it's more curved than a lot of like the Hunt 101, so it can hold a lot more ink inside. Most of my other nibs would run out of ink way too quick. It's very flexible, but I'm pretty sure I can push a Hunt 101 that fat as well. I think. Pretty sure. Not confirmed. Maybe not. Depends. Okay. Yeah, maybe once. True. True story. Okay. The hard part is keeping that hairline. And every time I do that shade, my tines are no longer... This is how you ruin a nib, folks. Okay. Take 2. I need to get that movement. Okay. I'm gonna try no heel of the palm, no anything. I'm just going to try to maintain flat, which is very, very challenging, and I don't know if I'll be able to do it. Oh, that's the hard part. Okay. We'll see. Oh, darn it! Ran out of ink. That is super big shade. Crud. Tiny little lowercase letters. Something started happening up here. I was like, that line, it looks like an accent shade. I must have been, I don't know, digging into some paper, or that might be because I started rotating my hand a little bit, preparing for this giant shade. I also, it's weird, writing this big, I normally wouldn't get this weird shape on that side. How to study the letter form to get a clear picture of it. Put it on a grid. You don't have to put it on a grid. You can put it on a grid. Okay, I want to try this giant W again. I'm having fun now. I never do letters this big. I wonder if my walnut ink would go wider. I'm gonna try walnut and see how that works. It probably won't go any wider, but
what we just experienced, doesn't it? Grilling out, lawns being mowed, and pools opening. These are some of the things we expect with summer.
I wouldn't say the Hunt 101 rusts any quicker than other nibs in the same condition. It'll rust quicker than any of the Nico G or Tachikawa G or any of those nibs, or like the Zebra G or any of those, primarily just because of the material. But I wouldn't think it would rust any quicker than a Leonard Principal or a Jalop 303. But I could be wrong. And notice, cleaning the top of the jar, because that's what we do now. Okay. We'll try this one, maybe twice more. Trying to make that first oval bigger so it looks a little better. Oh, I don't know if I have enough walnut to get a full dip. My jar's too empty. Oh, that was huge. Oh, my nib is falling out. It's not, it's hardly even in there. Oh, missed the lineup. Oops. Ugly lowercase letters, but that's okay. There you go, Brian. Is that big enough? I'm gonna try one more time, but it made it all the way. Thick enough. I'm pretty sure that hits maximum width for this nib. When it's dry, I'll measure it, but I'm pretty sure that hits max width. I am gonna try one more time though, and I'm gonna push as hard as I can and see what happens. I think I feel like I got thicker than that earlier. Could be wrong. I'm so nervous about the hairlines. It's very weird writing without anything else touching the paper. It's very, very scary. Okay, we'll get our nib back out here so we get all the ink in there. Okay. Push the shade. Duh. Nope. What up, James? How you feeling this evening? Are you pushing with the arm with these big ones? No fingers. My fingers aren't doing anything. This big one is 100% just my arms. What is this craziness? What up, Fozzie? James, or not James, Brian asked me to make a giant full landscape M or W. So that is what I'm trying to do. That one was a fail. One more try, I think. I'm good. I'm on edge right now because I'm currently writing. There's no way for me to touch my fingers or anything to the page without going through what I've already written. So the only thing that's touching the page is the very tip of the nib, which is very nerve-wracking. But we're trying. It's a fun challenge. And my nib is pushed way out of my holder so I can fit more ink on it, where the nib is hardly even being held in the holder. And it's way off of its ideal where it should be lined up. It should be pushed way in more, but it's the only way to get as much ink as I need on the nib. All right. Last try, maybe, I think. Maybe if I slow down on the shade a little bit. That was relatively smooth. I got a few airlines in there. He asked for the M and the W, so I'm just doing those right now. But I could do other letters, I guess. There. I think that's as big as it's gonna get. That shade started too high, but pretty sure that's as thick as I can go. There you go. There's my Brian. There's my eye cursive. Oh, there's so much ink in there. I can literally do this, and the ink falls down into the. Oh, now it hit the dry spot. Funny. Funny. I want to see. I gotta test out some of my other nibs and see if I can't find one that's a little that can flex wider. Because if I can get one that can flex wider, I don't have to make the shade that or the letter that big. Save you that page? Sure. How big was the shade? 1 second. If I go through... I have a folder here of... These are things that are to save. So these are all some of... When I do good attempts at things, they end up in this folder. And there should be... I'm going to look super close for it, but... If I can find it off the bat... Come on, where are you? I did that giant attempt for Instagram. Let's see if I can find it. Nope. Nope, can't find it. It's in there somewhere, but I'll look another day and compare it to this one. What up, Mom? Label it. The biggest one. I'll go through the ones that I did and I'll find the... I feel like there was one in there that was better than the last one I did. Just because it didn't have any airlines. The hairline was connected the entire time. Oh, now writing with a regular nib feels weird. I'm gonna go back to black though. Easier to see. How's it going, Mom? We're just doing, writing stuff. I just did a silly little writing challenge for my friend Brian to see how big I could write the letter W. I did a W because I find second half easier than the M. And there's not anymore, it doesn't look any fancier or worse, but I prefer writing the second stroke of a W than I do the second stroke of an M. So I chose to do the W instead. I hope that's okay. All right. Did I have any more questions? I feel like that was it for questions. Devin asked what my Halloween costume was going to be for this year, and I have no idea. Haven't given it much thought yet. Sweet dreams, Mom. Thanks for stopping in. All right. A blazer costume? Just a black suit dressed like an old penman? What does a blazer costume look like? I think I want to try to do a Newt Scamander, maybe. Or what was his name? The guy from Atlantis, from the Disney cartoon. Milo, or him maybe. Oh, Blozer has round glasses. I have round glasses. I could find those. But I want it to be Newt's Commander. What did Mom say? Go as a bad pylon. I could. That would be funny. Make a giant bad pylon costume. I don't know if focus for you guys. We'll zoom in a bit now that we're not working giant anymore. Ciao, Mom. Good night. Bad pylon costume. That would be so wide at the base. It'd be so hard to move. My flow, the flow of my ovals feels very off lately the past few days. Unfortunately, I don't know what's happening, but it just doesn't feel good like it usually does. A giant petticoat. It would take a lot of fabric to make a human-sized traffic cone. I'll look into it. I don't know if I'll be able to fit through doors. You know, because the proportions have to be right. It can't be too narrow on the bottom, or it's not going to look like a proper traffic cone. Oof. This nib doesn't like me anymore. Not giving me very good hairlines. Okay. So what do you guys figure? Should I just regular practice now? Or should I start working on, or I can work on this week's Sigsling and Signature a little bit? Or does anybody have any specific questions or anything you guys want to have reviewed or looked over? The capital F? Like so? Add a pipe in the bottom circumference, probably. Yeah, you'd have to add something to give it some structure. You make it look so stern. I don't know what you mean specifically by stern. So for the capital F, is your big issue with, is it the crossing of the capital F? Or just getting the standard stem to the capital F? So the way I like to do the cross on the capital F, I drop it a lot, almost, as you can see here, almost straight vertical, rather than bringing it across. Like traditionally, a T would be, the crossbar of the T would go just a compound curve going horizontally. My issue with that is always in designing stuff, it feels very windswept. Like this looks to me like a windswept bonsai tree blowing over that way. So I started dropping it a lot when I saw the famous Matarazz letter that we've gone over a bunch of times. He drops it quite a bit, kind of breaks all of the compound curve and rules and oval rules of the capital letters, but it's the way I've always done it since seeing that letter. You see it done so many ways. I can't agree on one way to do it that makes it look not a T. So then it's basic. I mean, the only difference is the cross then. For me, I like doing my cross. I keep it longer on the left-hand side. As you can see, all of them. It's much longer on the left-hand side and shorter on the right-hand side. Traditionally, sometimes it would be very short on the right-hand side. You'd see it just come out just a little bit and then have the tick there. And then the cross on top. The upper cross, this part here, is the same. If it's a T or an F, I've never done them any different ways. They are the same form. T and F. We just make one an F by adding one of those.
Winds southerly at about 15 with gusts of 25 miles an hour. Barometric pressure 30.00 and is rising.
Yeah, I mean, it's your choice if you want to add a loop before the curve or just go straight into a curve. You can go straight into it as well. I mean, there are many variations of the T and the F. They can technically go and cross like so, all in one stroke. That's less conventional. You don't see that one quite as much. Technically, you could add a little loop in there. That's too short, but you get the idea. We could make that loop at an angle. Like so. These are forms that I don't use all that much, but as far as the difference between the F and the P, they are the same. One thing that I sometimes like to do with an F, if I use the compound curve entry, I'll use that as my cross. Sometimes that's not a very good example of it. Some people recognize that as an F, some people don't. But I will often use a flourish to cross my F. Or we can also get that's another pretty variation. You could tuck this in closer so it sits closer to the stem if you want. Normally they wouldn't extend quite that far out from the stem. How about some archaic letter forms that have legitimacy issues? Can you think of any? I'm not sure what you mean. I don't write archaic letter forms, I guess. I write letters that people know and can read, so I don't know any. I'm assuming you just mean like old letters and old what's the word I'm looking at or trying to find? Doesn't matter. Old variations that were used in manuscripts and books that just aren't used anymore, but The letter forms shouldn't be hard to recognize.
Winds southerly at about 15 with gusts of 25
Our
miles.
job as penmen is to make them
And it's rising.
easy to recognize.
We're about a half inch behind, correction, a half inch ahead for the year.
Why is it easier to make smooth line transitions with huge letters than small ones?
A little bit of a change tomorrow.
Do you mean like compound curve transitions? I think because when we do a shape,
Satellite photo was pretty interesting for the western half of the U.S. Rain showers
this has a nice,
on that frontal system.
we have a nice slow flow. So because our movement is coming from our large muscles, we have time to create the smooth transition because we're transitioning from there to there when we change direction. Where when we shrink that down, our muscles are really good at doing large movements. These are, in the old books, they're referred to as your large muscles. They're good at making big movements, big ovals, big things like that. That's how they work. Conductors and whatnot. But to do smaller things, they require a lot of training to be able to do strokes like, oh, sorry, I'm totally behind my picture. Strokes like this with control, they require a lot more practice to basically train them to work on minuscule forms. And then when we get even smaller, it becomes much more difficult to control them. Because unfortunately, we have to maintain some speed. Not unfortunately, but we have to maintain a little bit of speed and motion so we maintain a nice clean hairline like we have when we do this big one. Like we wouldn't do this big one super slow. We would go about, I would say about this speed gives us a nice smooth line. But that speed, moving at that speed shrunk down, is quite quick. And if we slow down any more than that, our lines start to shake. So we have to maintain movement, but we're shrinking what we're doing, so it just makes it more difficult to gain that control. It just takes more practice, basically. Let's talk a little bit about movement writing. How do you train yourself to write speed like a rocket? So specifically, and this is not how a book taught me to write. It's not how any person told me to write. It is how my own breakdown / analysis of my journey and movement told me to do it. This is how I practiced when I transitioned from slow writing to fast writing. When I was writing slowly, the smoothness of my hairline was not a big issue. I wanted to keep my hairline as fine as possible, so I wasn't applying any extra weight onto the page. But if my lines were a little bit shaky, it didn't bother me as much. I wanted to obviously get them as smooth as possible, but because I was going slow, it was impossible to get a super smooth, flowy hairline. As we know, we can only get that flowy hairline with quick writing. Thanks for hanging out, Brian. Have a good evening. We'll see you in a bit if you come back in a bit. But so, like I said, when I was writing slow, I didn't care too much about slight shakes or a perfect, beautiful, flowy hairline because I knew it was almost impossible when you're writing slow. When I transitioned to fast writing, I made a change in my mind where all I cared about was the hairline. The form of the letter, I had a really good image from my slow writing and from my study. I had a good image in my mind of what it was supposed to look like, of what I was trying. I knew what I wanted to achieve. It didn't matter to me if I achieved it or not. What mattered to me was that my hairlines looked beautiful. I basically had a zero tolerance policy for shaky hairlines. All the moves had to be super flowy and quick. So my hairlines had to be perfect. My letters looked like garbage, but my hairlines had to be perfect. In order to maintain or to get a beautiful hairline, I used to write wicked fast. As an example, I mean, you can probably see old videos of me writing, but I used to do everything also whole arm. I pretty much never dropped my forearm for a long, long time. But I would do my forms like that. Obviously, forms are not that great. But I would write basically as fast as I could. Because when I wrote that way, you'll notice, I mean, obviously this oval is too long and narrow. This one is nice, but none of my lines have like a weird... You can see here there's a sort of interesting shape going on right here. When I slow down a little bit, you get sort of inconsistencies in your ovals. I wrote as fast as I could without the forms, and then as I started to train my muscles to perfect the forms at a super fast speed, I would slow down a little bit. I would continually slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, until I got to a point where I slowed down too much and my hairlines would start to suffer. And when I hit that point, I speed up again, just a little bit. So I would hit a point where what I would consider my ideal speed, where my lines look good and my forms are good. And I'm still fishing for that. That is an ongoing, forever task. But that is basically how I transitioned into fast writing. But when I first learned it, I dove in. Because there's no room for insecurity, or you gotta be confident and you gotta go for it. And if the form is good in your mind, it doesn't really matter if you write it perfect. I mean, you can always do it, see what you didn't do perfect. Okay, next time I gotta work on that because that's not perfect. Oh, thanks for hanging out. Yeah, tonight was pretty much a chatty one. Sorry, you guys just been hearing me talk for the past couple hours. Less writing today than talking. I hope that's okay for everybody. But I would say if you want to get into movement writing, dive into movement writing. If you go half, your lines are going to maintain a little bit of crookedness. There's going to be that hesitation, and people with a trained eye like myself, I'm going to see that hesitation in your writing. Whereas if you dive in, I would rather see no hesitation, but forms that are crazy, out of control. I would rather see that, because you can slowly get the control of those forms while keeping the beautiful flow. But if you're always hesitant, it's never going to get to a point where you have beautiful flow and nice forms. You'll get your nice forms, but it's going to look like a hesitant flow. That is why when I teach my movement writing class, I teach with a metronome. The metronome isn't the perfect speed. The metronome is likely faster than most people will normally write. It's faster a lot of times than I write, but it is a speed that forces smooth lines. So when the class goes to that speed, I can be sure as a teacher that all the students, whether their forms are good or not, everybody is getting a smooth hairline, which is what is, to me, important at that stage in the game. Yeah, today's a knowledge live, late night knowledge. More so than late night, super in-depth writing session. I hope that answered your question. That was, as all my answers have been today, rather long-winded. Whoops, I wasn't supposed to shade that M. Oh, I wrote that behind my picture. Sorry. Not bad. Not perfect, but not bad. I like this signature. When it's not done perfect, it still looks really nice. But there's always the goal of perfection. This ink feels really thick. Let's add some water to it. I like giving long answers. My answers are usually long, I think, because I give a lot of analogies and stuff like that. I like breaking things down so they can be understood as easy as possible. All right, water. I know it's a contact solution bottle, but I always keep one close to my desk full of water. I'm just gonna add, not even counting the drops, just a bunch of water into this ink because it feels super thick. Like it feels viscous on my nib, which is no good. I'm glad you like them. Short answers are good for things, like if a student were to ask a question and it's something that, as a teacher, I want them to find out for themselves, my basic answer is going to be really quick. It's going to be short, and it's not a lot of facts or anything involved in it. But then I'll go on to make analogies, so when the student is trying to find the answer to that thing that I need them to find out for themselves, there's a bit of sort of guidance there. So it's not so much a long answer to the question, it's here's your answer, and then this is sort of some tidbits that I want you to use on your journey to find that the proper answer for you. Because a lot of the questions that people ask don't have real answers that I can give. They're very much answers that need to be found out for themselves, which is a lot of penmanship. It's a personal journey. So I give a lot of Mike recommends this and this, but do what you do. It's your journey. What up, Devin? Can anybody tell me, and I could Google it, I was gonna Google it, I was thinking about it earlier, but does anybody know the origin of the term jack-o'-lantern, or why it's called a jack-o'-lantern? My question, the reason I was asking myself that earlier today, was if I carve a watermelon, for those of you who don't know, I prefer carving watermelons to carving pumpkins, but if I carve a watermelon, is it still a jack-o'-lantern, or is the jack-o'-lantern something specific to a pumpkin? And that got me thinking of where the term jack-o'-lantern came from. I don't actually know. I should Google it, but I'm just gonna ask you guys, and I can Google it later. No Googling it though. Don't Google and then tell me. That's cheating. Perspective is very important, yes. Analogies add to much more life to penmanship. Yeah. That's what I like about teaching, I think. The most. Be it dance, penmanship, be anything really. Breaking things down so they're understandable. Set in folklore to scare off the demons. Did it have to be a pumpkin though? Or was that just... I'll figure that out later. You're having trouble with flange adjustment. That's a big one. I should make another video specifically talking about different flange adjustments and stuff like that, and sort of the differences they make. I don't really talk a lot about that in my video on flange adjustment. That video was basically just me adjusting two flanges to fit my hand good, but it doesn't really explain the differences. That is one of the topics that I like people to explore on their own and figure out, but I could make a video that sort of talks about the differences. I've been doing penmanship forever, and with this pen, I changed this flange just yesterday, just a little bit. I gave it a little tweak as I was testing a theory. I don't know if it worked or not. I might tweak it back, but yeah. It really, I mean, it all boils down to the angle you're comfortable having your paper at, and the angle you like writing at. Ward off the evil spirits during the festival. The pagans, can't remember. The faith into a vegetable, so it can be any vegetable. What about a fruit? You guys in your pajama session inside jokes and stories. Yeah, I much prefer carving watermelons. I'm super pro watermelon carving versus pumpkins these days. There we go. That's like the exact shade I want. I wish it didn't cross that one, but that's pretty much good. Shade could be a bit bigger, but that is a nice shape. Nope. And here, this compound curve. When I do the S, this looks bad. Pumpkin's curry sounds delicious. I like pumpkin flavored things. I mean, I love carving pumpkins as well. I just much prefer the taste of watermelons, and I like carving the watermelon with a spoon and just carving as I eat it. It's quite delicious. Okay, I need to go from the C into the S. The stroke that's giving me the most trouble right now. That one. Now, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this has to be longer. And this has to be shorter. Exactly. The line starts to wobble and shake. So frustrating. I can't tell. Some of the chat is talking about penmanship, and some of the chat is talking about food, and some of it is talking about jack-o'-lanterns now. I'm confused. The loop of the... And the loop out of the C has to touch the top of the A. I mean, it goes through the very top of the A. It's not sitting right on there. You can see here on the breakdown sheet. It does cross through the very top of the A. But it goes really far out that way. Stays nice and close together. This stroke gives me the worst trouble, that S. I've always had trouble with getting that S shade looking nice when it drops so far below the baseline for some reason. It's not a stroke I should have trouble with. Yeah, almost does. Oh. Yes, people do often talk about food, which is fine. What's Pororo? So confused. S never looks good. Better. Totoro. I watched Kiki's Delivery Service the other day. Well, part of it. I was watching it with my niece and nephews when they were here. They didn't really like it, so we didn't make it all the way through. They were not fans, unfortunately. Okay, this needs to go bigger. That's better. The idea. Still doesn't look quite right. My biggest issue with this week's signature, like I said, my flow feels like it's been off. My ovals feel weird lately. And this signature is pretty much 100% just flow. Which means I think I need to pick up the speed ever so slightly. Got you. We're getting PJ session inside jokes today. Okay, longer on that C. That's better. The idea feels weird going that far off the C. That was too far. This song feels really chill. I feel like this song would not feel out of place on like the Monsters Inc. soundtrack. Minus the okay, better. That OR connection is my enemy. Lowercase letters? Is there any rule for shading minuscule letters? How regularly we should put shades in a word? There's no real rule. The shaded lowercase letters were often just basically at the choice of the penman. If there was a word like it traditionally, or you get like the lower A, and then you wouldn't do the C. Let's go through the alphabet. Which ones have shade? The B has a shade. The C wouldn't be shaded. The D has the top shade. If it's an ending D, you can put a shade on the bottom. I personally shade both, but that is sort of seen as a no-no sometimes because it creates a pretty heavy letter. E, no shade. F obviously has the ascender shade. G is shaded like an A. H is shaded like an N. I, no shade. J, no shade. K, usually no shade. It can have a tiny shade, but L has the same shade as the B. M has the last lower, or the last downstroke has a shade. O, usually no shade. Ornamental penmanship people like Mataraz used to add a slight shade to it P shaded like the N. Well, and shaded like the T and the D as well. Q shaded like the A. R. S isn't shaded. T is shaded. T. U not shaded. V is. W not shaded. X not shaded. Y shaded like the V. Whoa, ugly descent. And Z not shaded. So those are, I guess those are the shade options. Where you put them in is basically, the shades are just used to sort of even out the little accents throughout a piece. Most words would have like a couple shades in them, but if you had a word like banana, for example, if you shade, well, all the potential shade spots in banana, that's not how you spell banana. Let's try that again. If you shade all of them, it can create a relatively heavy letter. So it might be smarter to shade, say, just the A's. Or to shade the B and the N's. Whoops. I habitually shade the A's. Whoa. So, or it could be like that. So as you can see, they create different weights. So a penman would often use shades just to even things out. I think they would shade all the lowercase letters they could, unless it was gonna make a word look too heavy, then they would take some away. It's sort of that would be the general rule that I think I'd follow, but there wasn't really a rule. I tried connecting the W to S, I realized hugs are missing in this connection. What? You guys are speaking pajama session code. What is the trick to do the uppercase stroke? Shitresh, I'm gonna need you to be a little more specific on the trick. How would Moderod's write banana? I don't know. I would assume he would probably do it like this, with all the A's shaded. Potentially the B and all the A's, maybe? I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out what Chitrash is referring to. The trick for the uppercase stroke. I don't know what trick you mean. I mean, there aren't really tricks. There's just a technique of writing. Like B, L, and H. Well, just like a stem? Like that stroke? To do a B? Ooh, that's a pretty B. There's no real trick. I mean, small lips. Oh, sorry, you said you wrote uppercase stroke. I didn't know what you meant. Oh, you mean the ascended stroke. on the B, L, and H. Got you. So there's not really a trick. I guess you mean getting that stroke right there. Got you. Yeah, so that's an ascended stroke on the lowercase letters. And there are a couple ways that you can do it. The main way that I sort of focus on it, it's a combination of getting used to your push pulls, like so, and then squishing an angled oval. So a standard angled oval is about like so. You want to squish that so it's like that. And then when you combine the two, you get something like that. And you lift up when you hit the cross point, approximately. And then you continue the letter from there. And of all the strokes in penmanship, I'm pretty sure ascended strokes are the ones that give me the most trouble. I'm not a natural ascenderer. One thing you can do, if there is a trick to ascended strokes, something you can do, I don't do, but you can do, if you rotate your paper, like so, if you look at my forearm, when I was writing the other way, or the way I like to write it, is with push-pull motion. So my arm is going out and in, away from my body and back towards my body. But if I rotate my paper, so it's at a slightly different angle, now, instead of pushing from my shoulder, my whole arm forward and back, I can use what I call hinge movement, where I'm rotating just my elbow like this, like I was waving or washing a window. And if I do that, I'm naturally gonna get the flow of the ascended stroke way easier than using a push-pull motion. Now the reason, and the only reason I don't use this all the time, is because I don't like rotating my paper all the time. I like the idea of writing everything with my paper this way. If you want to have the perfect ascender stroke, for me anyways, if I rotate my paper, I will get a cleaner ascended stroke than if I do the push-pull motion. But I like the idea of doing it all the same, and I don't want to continuously be rotating my paper, so I train using the combination of these two strokes to be able to do the ascended stroke that way. I hope that answers your question. Ascenders are fun. If you want to get the perfect ones, rotate your paper and use hinge movement, and they pretty much, it's infuriating how clean they come out pretty much all the time with very little effort. I wish I could do them that clean with push-pull movement, but unfortunately I cannot. I get them relatively nice most of the time, but why do you prefer not rotating your paper? I just don't like rotating my paper. Also, it would require, I would have to rotate it the exact same amount every time. And I mean, it's easy now because I'm using guide sheets and whatnot. But if, like, let's say I rotate my paper this much, if I use hinge movement, I have that. If I rotate my paper a little farther, it's that. If I rotate even farther, it's that. Because I have no other reference to how I'm writing. That actually creates a pretty neat effect when you look at it this way. Take off. But there's a potential in getting the angle wrong, whereas if I keep my paper the same, then I know that this is like my push-pull is away from me, so I know that all my letters are going to be on the correct slant. So I could just have a way of knowing that I rotate my paper the exact right distance all the time, or rotation all the time, but it's just something I've never bothered to do, or to figure out the exact proper rotation for my hinge movement. So I like to just write them with push-pull movement. Also, when I do letters like the S, and the L, and the C sort of, they require that same sort of traffic, that same movement. So I don't want to rotate my paper every time I do an S and an L. I just don't like the idea of rotating my paper all the time. If I rotate it for certain flourishes every once in a while, I think that's good. But to rotate it all the time just feels extra and laborious. It's something I don't want to do. I just want to write. And this is how it was taught. I feel like with enough practice, the push-pull movement will be as natural as the hinge movement. It's just the hinge movement is really natural. So I would consider that like a cheat. Because Mike is weird. I am weird. I don't know, I just don't like rotating my paper. If I looked at penmanship and was like doing a perfect ascended stroke without rotating the paper versus doing it with rotating the paper, it's almost like rotating is too easy, and I know I can do it, so I would rather train the one that I can't do and try to get it good, and then the whole writing experience works a lot more natural than doing it than taking the shortcut, if that makes sense. I already know I can do the shortcut, so I don't want to do that. I like the idea of being able to do it perfect. It's like how when we look at all the old writings, it's easy to say, when we see the clips, you guys have probably seen them in the old scrapbooks of the parts that are like glued in and taped in to be engraved or to be copied. They were all like cut and pasted, like vintage Photoshop. So people would say, oh, like that's how they did it. But the idea of being able to do it all perfect on one sheet of paper is way too appealing. I don't like thinking, oh, I'll just do a bunch of perfect ones and then put them on a sheet of paper. I want to be able to do the whole page perfect. Whether I can or not, that's the goal. So I train towards that goal. I don't train towards the easy stuff, the easier stuff. Because most of the time I know I can already do that stuff. And easy stuff is boring. It's way more fun when you do the impressive, difficult stuff. Any analogy for the W and S? I missed that question earlier. W and S analogy? The W and S is just one of those connections that just is sort of the way it is. I don't use any tricks or any fancy techniques. I could bring... Whoa, that's a U. I keep wanting to go straight into the S. You could do something like that. But as far as the connection, I don't do anything different than any other connection. You have to be wary of space. It's really easy to make the W and the S too close together, because then the S is ending right here. You have to make sure that you're traveling forward enough so the S is ending a space away from the W. But I don't do like an extra dip down or anything like that for the W and the S. Sorry, catching up on the chat. I use a straight holder for the small letters, so maybe that's the reason I can't go as fast in oblique holder. It shouldn't make a big... if we're still talking about doing the ascended stroke, it shouldn't be much different. I know, for me anyways, going from ornamental penmanship to business penmanship, the only difference in my movement is sort of where I stop. In ornamental penmanship, I stop at the connection, whereas in business penmanship, I continue on through. And I use a more vertical nib. But, don't quote me on that. I'm not a pro at business writing. Unfortunately, I should be. They're like fishes walking on their tails. They totally are. That's great. How to train for monoline minuscules. If you want to train monoline minuscules, business writing. There are tons of books and PDFs of explanations and going through business writing. But anybody should train. Like, you can go Palmer Method, you can go E.C. Mills' book, Champion's book, The Champion Method of Penmanship. Baronsmeyer has a book. Every business educator has lessons on them. I haven't compiled those because there's so many. I probably will one day. But there's a ton of lessons on monoline writing. But business penmanship, you should learn those techniques. They're slightly different than ornamental penmanship, but the better your business penmanship gets, the better your ornamental penmanship will be, inevitably. Palmer's Penmanship Budget is a great book. I wish I owned a physical copy of that book. I have the PDF. I want a copy of it, but I don't have one. Oh, Marilyn says, way more impressive when you nail it. Yes, you're talking about the ascended stroke. True. Kinder than Tamblyn. True. I prefer Tamblin's teaching, I think. But honestly, even like Blozer's book of ornamental penmanship goes through the lowercase letters. Not quite as in depth. But yeah, there's tons of books out there. Mary L. Champion's book is a really good one for business penmanship. Trying to think of which other one I really like. Mills is one of the best, but there's not a lot of like documentation or explanation. So I don't know, you may like it or you may not like it. The examples are good. I just wish there was more sort of explanation into all of it. Who else? That's probably one of the good things about Palmer Method. I think business penmanship purists maybe don't like Palmer Method as much, but I think it works good. He taught probably the most people. They're all kind of the same idea, really. They all say the same thing. Business penmanship, unlike ornamental penmanship, wasn't expressive. It was do this like a computer. So you go through the steps and you learn to do it. Lifts or breaks in a word. That's another thing that I think is left up to the penman. Some of the old penmen did have lots of attitude, it's true. Lifting or breaking, there's been lots of conversations about this, and there's articles and stuff about it. My philosophy on lifting, I lift now a lot more than I used to, but the way I always have thought about lifting is I only lift if I can hide the lift. Like if I can hide the fact that I lifted, then I will lift. So if people can see that I put a lift there, then I did something wrong, in my opinion. But you can lift a lot. Like, we can go back to, if I write the word lift, I pretty much always lift on the ascended stroke, as I mentioned before, at that spot right there. And if you hit it right at that spot, it's easy to hide because it's on a connection. If you go a little bit too far, like that, because the ascended stroke oftentimes had a slight accent shade at the bottom, it's an easy place to hide a potential little, if you messed up a little bit there, it's an easy place to hide it. So that's one place that I pretty much always lift. I don't lift often in the M, but it depends on where I am in my writing. If I do the first two and I find that I feel like I'm stretching, then I will lift and reset my forearm to do the third one. But I basically only lift when I feel like I need to. There's no places that I lift always, except for like the ascended strokes, I always lift on that downstroke. And doing like the T, for example, I always lift there and then I do the stroke down. I never used to. I used to go straight into it and then down. I used to do it all in one. Back in the day, I would go up, weight, and shade down, and it would sort of create very similar look. But yeah, I lift anytime I feel like I need to reset. Lately, actually just today, I noticed a lift that I've been doing relatively often. When he asked about the O, you could lift on the top of the O. Like there, you can lift, after the entry stroke, you can lift there and continue from that. Because the O, this is essentially a hard point there, it's easy to hide your lift there. I was recording a video today, and I lifted on an E right there, which is very unusual. And someplace that I feel like I normally wouldn't lift, but I've caught myself doing it just naturally. Again, the lifts aren't something I really think about anymore. I just lift when I feel like I need to. When I'm getting out of my zone, I will lift and move the paper or lift and reset my forearm. But on the E, because it connects there, it's really easy to hide. So yeah, I lift anytime anytime I feel like I need to, but if I was doing an E and I was right here, I wouldn't naturally lift on an E. But if I was writing a couple letters and I got to here, and if the E was the last letter or if my connective stroke was going to be cut off because I was already reaching the end of my writing zone, then I would reset my elbow or move my paper and then do my exit stroke for the E. So it's all kind of like, if continuing through is going to mess up my next exit stroke, because that's where your movement flow is that undercurve, your connective stroke. And if it's going to affect, if you're already at the end of your movement and it's going to affect your exit stroke, then I would lift. The K, so again, I lift on the ascended stroke like I always do. Depending on which K I do, if I do this variation, I don't lift, but I normally do this one, which has a lift in it, because obviously that overturn finishes, and then I drop down with a slight shade and an exit stroke. So I lift that one. Yeah, and lifting, because you study engrosser script, that makes sense. I also feel like there's more lifts than there need to be in engrosser script. I'm one of it's an unpopular opinion that I dislike. Like, I lift in engrosser script, but I dislike seeing the lift. I don't like the space on the bottom of, like, if I'm doing a stroke like so, I don't like leaving a space and then going into my upstroke. I would much rather, this is not good engrosser script, but I would much rather them connected, because this draws my eye. I don't like the look of it, personally. Engrosser script lifts all the time, but those lifts are hideable, so I like hiding them. Not everybody does. Some people like the look of the hairlines not touching. I personally am not a fan of it. Same with the hairlines cutting off on either side of the shades. I want them to go through, because I want it to look like I wrote it. I want it to look like everything is fluid movement all the way through, even if it was or wasn't. That was one of those things, one of the Mataraz things. It looks like he didn't ever lift his pen, basically at all, and it looks like he wrote wicked fast. But many people have confirmed that he didn't always. He sometimes wrote his lowercase letters relatively slow, but you would never know it, because he connected them and he hid his lifts in a way that you couldn't tell. I don't remember what article. There is an article by somebody that talks about lifting, and it says something to the effect of lift as much as you can as long as you can hide them or something. Do you manipulate the pen for making square tops and bottoms? In one of your videos showing the T, it seems Like you didn't manipulate. No, I don't manipulate when I do square tops and bottoms. It's particular. I use time manipulation. I push my tines out. But if you like pen manipulation, just so some terminology, time manipulation is when you're applying weight in a certain direction. So you're forcing a certain time to do a certain specific thing. Whereas pen manipulation is rotating the pen actually in your finger, a proper rotation. I don't use pen rotation or pen manipulation basically ever. If I'm doing slow writing, sometimes I do, but I don't change the rotation in my fingers. I do use nib or time manipulation a lot, and doing the flat top tees is one of the things that I enjoy teaching. I enjoy talking about, and it's one of the things that people ask me about probably the most. I'm in the process of working on another video similar to the one that I have on Instagram, on IGTV, but more in depth about the shade on the tee, where to place it, options on placing it, and just getting more in depth into that stroke. But essentially, nope, I just apply weight and then pull down. And ideally don't get that ugly swooping shape like I'm getting right there. It's just a downstroke. Another reason why, like when we're doing the ascenders, it's that same direction as I'm pulling down. I need to get used to pulling down in that direction a lot, so that all my T's and D's, P's I do slower. I do my P's quite slow, in comparison to how fast I go down on my T's. I enter into a shade for the P a lot slower than I exit out of a shade for a T and a D, if that makes sense.
A little bit of a change tomorrow, and of course the possibility of some scattered showers. Today, of course, there's nothing showing up on the radar. However, they sound like frontal, pretty interesting for the western half of the U.S.
Breaking letters.
Rain showers and thunder showers along that frontal system. And that
Time manipulation in ES square tops too? Yep. Well, it's, yeah, I mean,
begins at 6 o'clock in the morning.
the first page of, I think it's the first page of the Zenarian manual says, I don't remember word for word exactly what it says, but it essentially says, do this stroke until you can do it without retouching it. Obviously, if you want utter perfection, you're going to go back and retouch and sharpen the edges, but you can get a square top even easier than ornamental penmanship because the angle is less. The more vertical it is, 55 versus like today, 48, going 55, it's much easier to get a square top and come down and curve out of it. Yeah, and it's one of the things, you don't always have to retouch, or you don't need to retouch. If you want perfection, like if I was submitting a certificate of excellence or something, or a master penman certificate, or something that I wanted to be absolutely perfect with engrosser script on it, I would write it with my square tops, and then I would go back after and sharpen all the edges. It'd be less squaring them off because they're already square, and just sharpening them, just refining that edge a little bit to make sure they're perfect. If perfect was what I was going for. Just because I like doing that stroke for the T so much. And it's not always perfect. You'll see this little notch right here. Oh, why didn't that light turn on? Oh, it was just behind. As you can see, I have everything set up back on the timers. I don't know why that one is slower though. Funny. I guess that means it's midnight. Neat. Alright, let's get rid of this sheet of paper. Or do I have blacklight paper close by? I haven't gone to blacklight hour in a while. First things first, gotta change my lunettes, change my glasses. Oh yeah! I think I silenced it. I did, it was turned off. Whoops. Sorry, I had my midnight alarm on my phone was straight up turned off. I must have turned... Oh, I turned it off last week because we ended the live and then it went off like loud in my apartment and it was annoying, so I turned it off. All right, what do we got to do here? We got to change up our music a little bit. I wish I could make all of this be automatic. First, we're going to bump the brightness here so you can see my glasses and my face just a little bit. Then we have to turn off this super chill, cool music. Which, thanks DJ Quads, I quite like the music we listened to today. Then what are we going to listen to? We have a new playlist today for energy. Let's get some electronic music going on. You guys have to let me know if that volume is crazy loud or not. There we go. Cool. Now I need blacklight paper. I have a folder somewhere of used blacklight paper that I should use again on the opposite side, but I don't know where it is, and now all the lights are off, so I wouldn't be able to find it, even if I tried. Let me quickly cap my inks so I don't spill. Get out the blacklight ink. Drop the blacklight to the paper. All right. I wish that Lego would glow in a black light. That would be so awesome. A while ago, I was trying to find ways to get the bad pylon behind me, his white bands to actually glow, but I couldn't get them to glow. I might have to give him some blacklight glasses. I can't paint them. You don't paint Lego? Come on. That's like sacrilegious. Alright. Let's see how our blacklight's looking here. I wasn't paying attention and I got glowy ink all over my finger. Can you show the R with the tick? Lowercase r, yeah. How is the glowiness? Can we get this any brighter for you guys today? That's maybe better. So there's the three standard R variations. There's number 1, which is the standard R that we use most of the time. Like so. At which point I don't lift or really stop anywhere in that one. What happened here? My screen got darker. Perfect. Brighter. There we go. I want to be seen. Okay. There's the R. Then there's the variation of the R. How tall does it go above the X height? So if we imagine, you guys can see the lines on the video. If this was my X height, the R goes basically just above it. Just above the X height. It's like this little bead is above the X height. So we come up here, that little compound curve transition, and then we go down. So it's it's not super high above the X height. It depends on how big that little bead or how big that point is there. So if that's the X height, we just go above it. Now, I don't end up doing it because it's not in grosser script. I don't do it like an engrossers or a sign writing. There's no actual loop or weight that goes into there. That's more for engrosser script or sign writer script or moderate script or something like that. But then the other R's, we have one where you go into just with a regular overcurve into a downstroke. And then you go out of it just in an exit overcurve, like so. Normally not that tall, I guess. That's an ending R. That's the one that I've started using the most. Some people read it like a V, but most people that are watching ornamental penmanship can tell the difference. So that's the ending R, or another version of the ending R, and one you see a fair bit in... Jeez! I don't know if you guys heard that. That was loud. A heater bangs so loud when it turns on, which is weird. The space between is equal to a U space or less. Less. I would say it's this. It's what is it? Oh, don't quote me on this, but it's like a half space, similar to the V or the last stroke on the W. For the V, they're thinner letters. It's similar to that one. It doesn't go quite as wide as a U. I don't believe. All right, the other version of the ending R, or an R that's used in business writing and oftentimes inside a word as well, starts the same way as this, the second one we did, but then it goes straight up on the slant line. There's a tiny little bead, and then like so. That one's used quite a lot. I don't use this one as much. I use these two. I interchange between these two for ending R's. I don't often use them inside a word. Sometimes I do, and it just kind of happens without me really thinking about it. For a while, when I was practicing this one a lot, it would just sort of end up in words without me really thinking about it. But naturally, I use the standard R. But this one is, I think, the more common one in business writing. If I were to write the word writing, this paper is way too scratchy for this nib. So that's the other R. So this one can look really pretty. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Second R and third R, yes, are within the X height. Third R, this might go a little bit above, because this over curve would be at the X height, just like on an N or an M. So I guess this part would be ever so slightly above, but not a lot. This one goes, the first one goes the highest above the X height. Second one, all the way in the X height, unless you do like I did on this first stroke and you take that overturn way over. But ideally, traditionally, it would go overturn, down, and then curve out, like so. Similar to how the ending T would have the same overturn out at the end of it. Is there a way to flourish that ending R? Yeah, of course. To flourish off of them, just an example of the two. You can choose which direction if you want to go direct or reversed oval. If we use, say, the second variation, we can go off of it like this. You can do any flourish that goes in a reversed oval direction. That's pretty much the only direction you can go with that one. You can't really go in an indirect or in a direct oval because you're moving in a overturned direction. You could technically do a compound curve, I guess. That would look weird though, I think. But technically that wouldn't be against the rules. I just think it looks weird. The third variation, you definitely can. So the third variation, if I want to flourish off of them, I think the second variation looks best when it's just simple, nice and clean, similar to the T. Like so. The third variation, you can take this one any direction. You can go over this way. Again, you have to be careful that it doesn't look too much like a V. You can go this way. You can do lots of different things with the third variation. Lots of options. The R and S in words go above the X and through off the connection space currently. Yeah, the R and the S go, they're the two of the lowercase letters. They're the two of the non-extended lowercase letters that go above the X height. What do you call this one here? You call this one the nay-nay? This is a cowboy whip? I don't think it has a name. It's just, I've never named it anything. It's direct oval into a compound curve into a reverse oval horizontal. That bisects the baseline. I've never given it a name. It's just one of the standard compound curves, or it's one of the standard flourishes. That's funny. Yeah, I've never named them. It does kind of look like a whip. A little cowboy hat on this guy. Kind of looks like devil horns, but it's a cowboy hat. There's his lasso. I guess I could have had his other arm doing it. There he's riding his horse. There we go. Ooh, you're watching me on the TV. Fun. Watching me draw stick cowboys. Super entertaining for you and your friends. Funny. Hi, brains. Now I'm on everybody's TV. Right on. Not mad at it. Oh, funny. That's officially my first time drawing a stick horse. Not a very impressive stick horse. But I guess stick horses, stick anything isn't supposed to look that impressive, I guess. See, that's, oh, so this is the nene? That's what you call it? Nice. Awesome. That's one nay. That's one nay. Oh, that's not a full nay. That's just one nay. Got you. Just one nay. You guys are funny tonight. Oh, I'm getting a lot of airlines with this nib on this paper today. Pretty scratchy. An interesting song. For the record, I haven't heard any of these songs yet. I just downloaded a bunch of electronic music. Electronic happy, I think, was the categorization, the genre and category for it when I downloaded it. This one is a little on the Inspector Gadgety side. I figured why not? Get something new. Alright. Try this Sig Sling and Sunday signature a couple times in blacklight and see what we can come up with. I don't know if This paper will... I don't know if I can do it very good on this paper, though. It's pretty scratchy. Mike's got a shiny... Yeah, that's when I wasn't paying attention. When I opened the jar of blacklight ink, and I went to do what I was talking about earlier, cleaning it out with a paper towel. I wasn't really paying attention, and the jar was far enough from the blacklight that I couldn't see it glowing inside the jar, so I was just like aimlessly cleaning out the inside with the paper towel. It looked empty because it wasn't glowing, but it just wasn't shining in the blacklight. So now I have a glowy finger, which I don't know if that'll... Probably have to actually wash that for it to come off all the way. Yep, that's in there now. Glowy finger for the rest of the evening. Or until I go wash my hands after this. Like the day I had the fully glowy hands when I was messing with OxyClean. I use Blue-Eyed Ghost by Noodlers. Blue-Eyed Ghost? Blue Ghost by Noodlers. No, I'm always very cautious to not touch my face when I do the Blacklight Live part. Otherwise, I'll get a crazy looking blobs on my face. Don't need that. That was better. Not perfect. Glowy nose for Halloween. You would have been pretty glowy. That's funny. Have I ever done a full glow alphabet? I don't know that I have. I don't know if my arm is going to be good enough today to give me a nice alphabet, but we'll see. Off to a bad start. I haven't tried his recipe yet. I need to. I don't have any other glowy inks. Because I would like to find an ink that glows well and can be used with black paper. I feel like that would be cool. Not a bad G. My exit strokes are very nice today. Not enough space on the H. I just realized I'm writing these very big. Yeah, I've started doing that interesting ending. It's not a normal M or N, but I've kind of fallen in love with that weird, fancy ending. I use it almost all the time now for the N, but I've started now adding it to the ending of the M as well. Just 'cause. Is it meds time? W, X, Y. And Z. Full alphabet. All right. I love the new V you taught me. I use it. I mean, it's a nice V. Do some numbers. I don't really. I never do numbers. I guess my numbers are always super basic. And I never write them. I don't do numbers fast, basically ever. I write my numbers like so. There's 1. Sometimes it doesn't have the entry to it. There's 2. Sometimes it has that little tail on the end. Other times it's round like that. There's 3. Should be like that. I never do numbers. I don't really know how to do good numbers. That should be taller. Those are my numbers. I basically do not super strict engrosser script or copperplate numbers most of the time. What are the properties of a good ink? I mean, for me, a good ink has to keep up. It has to give me a nice hairline. For example, I was just yesterday having an extreme issue with an ink that I was using that was what in the fountain pen world they would call it was being a hard starter. I would start writing my like a capital A or a capital O without an entry stroke, which is one of these. Like I used to write my A's always like this, with a horizontal entry stroke. But if I would write it without the entry stroke, for some reason when I touch down, it wouldn't drop any ink on the paper. For some reason, I'm not sure why. Or if I'm doing the O, doing this O, doing that O as well, the nib would touch and it would scratch, and I would see the outline a little bit, but it wouldn't fill in. So that's just that's an ink that has some flow issues for one reason or another, unfortunately. So an ink that flows good is important. An ink that gives you a nice shade is important. This ink that I'm using right now is not, sorry, I meant to say a nice hairline. The ink I'm using right now is not a great ink for, it doesn't give nice hairlines. A lot of white inks and whatnot don't give nice hairlines. This ink is very, very thin, very liquidy. I'd be curious to see what it's like if it had like gum arabic added to it. Does gum arabic glow? I don't know. It might not. But this ink could be thickened up a little bit. I don't thicken it up because I like that when the lights go on, it's invisible ink, and I'm assuming adding something to it would affect that. But those are the main things. Like iron gall ink is going to give you the best hairlines most of the time, but you can find walnut and other inks that give comparable or almost as good of hairlines. Usually, really thick ink doesn't really give good hairlines, but really, really liquid ink doesn't either. There's like a middle ground. Like really thin ink usually needs some gum arabic to thicken it up a little bit so that it can make a good hairline. But if it gets too thick, like most of the Instagram videos you see, where people are writing slow and they get the really thick ink that bubbles up a lot in the swell and Instagram audiences love it, those usually don't make really nice hairlines. The hairlines look fine when the people are writing really slow, but they don't get any better when you add movement to it. They don't get any thinner than that, I find most of the time. So it's basically finding that middle ground. Yeah, gum arabic can make a big difference. I currently don't have any or don't use any inks with gum arabic in it or in them. I know a lot of people add gum arabic to their walnut ink. I never have. I feel like I've always just got good results with just the ink itself. I wish my blacklight ink gave me slightly better hairlines. I need to experiment mixing it different. But then if the hairlines were too light, I don't think the camera would pick it up. I'm gonna try to record a video of that signature tomorrow, I guess. What is tomorrow? Wednesday? Yep. Gum arabic is a great way to thicken up fountain pen ink. That would be a good idea. What am I writing way over there? No. Yeah, don't put calligraphy or thickened ink in a fountain pen. That's a no-no. I mean, you can do it, you just have to clean your fountain pen out more often. Wobbly hairline lately. Or wobbly ovals. It's no good. There we go. That's better. Finally, that was a nice row. My ovals are starting to come back. They went on vacation for a little bit. Have I made gouache? Once I made gouache. Was it last year when I did Yves Leterme's Trajan's Roman Capitals course, and I put out a call to the internet and all of my calligraphy friends to help me because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I made it once. And it worked great for the class, but I never used it for penmanship. I mixed it for brush, or to use, I guess not brush. What did I use it for? I used a broad pen nib. I brushed it onto a broad pen nib. So I didn't use it. I have no idea how good the hairlines were or anything. I know a lot of people use it. I just never have. Yeah, I have no idea about gouache's broad pen finesses. I think so. I know there are a lot of people who use white gouaches for white ink. I know that's a thing. The people that don't use bleed-proof white, I think, use gouache. For pointed pen, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of people that use it. I think a lot of wedding calligraphers use it a lot because it allows them to mix different colors. I just don't know what I'm doing when I'm mixing it, because I never really need to do jobs that require it, so... Shades are consistent, ovals are not. Thank you. This was inspired by some practice sheets that Brian did the other day. I have never had a lot of consistency with this shade, so requires a lot of work. For me, I very often also get this weird blobby shape on the exit. Yes, they are pretty. The one thing I need to fix, or that I'm trying to focus on when I do it, I often do, when I do the, I guess, what you just called the infinity entry, or if I do this oval into a compound curve, I always end up, the transition from here to here is always very spaced out. I've talked about this on previous lives. Like doing that entry, for example, from here to here is very spaced out, where traditionally the penman would do an oval, and then when they transition to the second oval, it's very almost abrupt. Like this part from here to here is very abrupt. Do the first oval, finish that oval, and go up immediately into the next one. And I think it looks really cool. Sorry, I did that behind my picture. But it's one of the things that I think stops a lot of my work from looking traditional or vintage, is how spaced out that is. And that just comes from their hours of muscle training, those ovals, and me not putting enough emphasis on it when I was getting started, I guess. And this V is an extreme case where naturally I would want to do the V like this, but they would have this go up and almost hit like the angle, the writing angle, to then come down, but to not cut off this oval fully finishes and then goes up. Gives it a pretty cool look. Yep, I mean, a lot of people that's why a lot of people use dinky dips. So they're only using a little bit of ink at a time, so less of the ink is getting exposed to air. I personally I let the ink expose and then I just add water when it starts to get thick. Dinky dips are just tiny little, you'll see them, tiny little ink jars. Little, like they're as thick as your finger. A lot of calligraphers use them. Itty bitty things, just about as deep as your nib can go in. Yeah, we talked about this at the beginning today. If iron gall ink is exposed to air, well, it'll oxidize, but I don't think it affects it terribly. It'll be a fresh bottle of some iron gall inks will go on almost like clear, and then as the ink sits on the page, it oxidizes, there's a reaction, and it turns black. Whereas if the ink jar is open for a long time, it's not gonna have that effect. But as far as the ability to write, I personally don't think there's a big difference leaving it to air. It doesn't affect it a whole lot. In my experience anyways. There might be some scientific chemistry stuff going on, but yeah, for the dinky dips, it's important to have a holder because they're so tiny they'll tip over really easily. But luckily, since they're so small, holders are really easy to make, or lots of people make them and sell them already. Custom ones, chill ones, acrylic ones, suction cupped rubber ones. There's a whole bunch of different options for the dinky dips, because they are a very popular tool for a lot of calligraphers. The silicone ones are nice. I think Martha uses those. Ah, that's too bad. Oh, what happened there? I lost my C and my S shade. Oops. I think my paper is a little oily down here on the bottom. Or my nib needs to be cleaned off, one or the other. Boom! That's a... I mean, the shade on the C could be a bit higher. That was a pretty good one. A was no good, but... we take our little wins when we can get them. Don't mix peanut butter into your fountain pen ink. No, that's a valid caution to give, I would say. Well, ladies and gents, I think that about wraps it up for today. We did some question answering, some gigantor writing, I got into sort of legit practice mode here at the end a little bit, doing some V's. But I think we touched on all the things we needed to touch on. It is almost 1 o'clock in the morning here, so I should probably go to bed. It is shockingly bright outside. That street lamp is very bright. I never really notice it because I always have my lights on. Never chill in here in the dark. 6 minutes short of 4 hours. We don't have to hit the 4-hour mark. We've done it before. But today was fun. If you have any ideas on what you guys would like me to do next week, let me know. Either put them in the comments below here on the YouTube video, or share them with me on Instagram. If you are watching and you are not subscribed, please like the video, subscribe to me, hit the bell icon in case I have some videos for YouTube coming up. I gotta get back into YouTube video making. Foiling, right. I could do a foiling live next week. I'll think about that some more. That could be fun. Could do a bit of it, not a Q&A, but I know a lot of people have questions about foiling, and I missed those temperature ones today, so I can figure that out for next week. And maybe I'll do a foiling late night live. That could be fun. I'll add that to the list and see how we can make it work. 5, 6, gosh, 8 or 9 hours. That's long. I think if I was going to do one that long, I would need really specific, like, topics or things that I was going to do for a long time. That is a very long time to be sitting and writing. I would do it, but I would have to really be doing something, not just practicing, because I don't practice for nearly that many hours. That's too long to just sit and write without another goal or project in mind. Maybe for a charity, that would be not a bad idea. You could do some form of, that could be interesting. Is there some way I can raise money for a charity by doing a ridiculously long live? Something to think about. But it's late and I'm tired, so not gonna think about it today. But I hope you guys had a good time. Like I said in the beginning of today's video, in those questions, make sure that you are falling in love with the process. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, that life should be just a bit of silliness, really. Ending the stream in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Click.